And Bob, he actually said right out, straight up, first.
Off at the end of the day.
It's like, you know that your farts are bad when you yourself are offended by them. Where you're like, oh, Jesus, oh, God damn, man.
I've had to evacuate my truck a couple of
Yeah,
times.
quick, get the animals out of the house while you still can. Vet bills are high as it is. So what we are going to actually...
Have you ever done it? Have you ever done it and then had to, you go to the store and come back and it's still there when you come back?
Yeah, man. Yeah. But that was back when I was drinking, though, dude. I mean,
I was sober, so I don't know what my excuse is.
Some truly quality conversation here. So tonight we're going to Bob, welcome to the show. We're glad you're here. I'm going to kind of hang out and wait for some other people to fill in, though. We obviously have a lot to talk about. We haven't been able to connect. I had some things that kept me from being able to host several times in the last few weeks. Hopefully all of that is ironed out now, because I'd really like to get a regular groove going. I think we got some cool ideas here. But what I would like to ask is, Brent, did you watch any of the live stream between me and David Peters by any chance?
I did not. I didn't have time, and I probably didn't have the patience.
Actually, it was quite enlightening and quite good.
It's good.
I'm sure it probably was, but yeah, I didn't have the patience most of the time. When I see him respond to something, I usually don't respond back because I know a lot of the times that he's trolling, and I know that he's a smart guy, and I know that he's insightful, but the way that he says things sometimes, and the fact that he says certain things sometimes, I know that he's just trying to get a rise out of people, and I just don't have the kind of time anymore to waste on trying to get to the bottom of something.
It's funny that you mentioned that because today, because he's been pretty active over the last few days, just troll-lo-lo-lo-lo-lo-lo. And I went to him, I sent him a private message, said, I think most of the people that hang out here are hip to you at this point, man. Why don't you actually start offering real arguments? Because it's true. Almost everybody that comes to the Skeptic Tank these days it's like he'll post something that's clearly a troll, and it just goes right by. Nobody says anything except for Talbot, who is easily baited into that kind of stuff. As smart as Talbot is, and I have to give the man credit, he is a smart guy, but he is kind of he is a Trump religious zealot. He's not just a supporter or a voter. He's a Trump religion zealot type.
To read a meme that I just came across that popped me, and I had to share it in a group that I'm in. It's just a picture of Trump, and it says, "Lifelong Democrat hands House, Senate, and presidency to the Democrats while destroying the Republican Party." Now that's before the deaths.
That's some real troll-a-lolling there. That's masterful trolling. That's really good. Holy crap, man! That's actually quite brilliant. That's great. It's true. He was a lifelong Democrat.
Yeah, he was.
So let's chat about this for a minute. There's a lot of people that are saying that the ultimate result of all of this was Trump actually, when he came into power, when he came into office, even during the campaign, it was being speculated that he'd actually fracture the party. So now at the end of his 4-year term, it certainly looks like some of those predictions could be right.
I'm not as sure now. A week ago, I would have bet everything that I had that he would have taken the $200 million or whatever that he's got in the bank from the donations for the lawsuits and started a MAGA party and split the Republican Party in half. Now I'm not so sure that that's going to happen because of all the support that he has lost over the last 72 hours.
Yeah.
Troy, what do you think?
Well, I'm not so sure that he split the party because you have the Tea Party movement going back to like 2009, 2010, and it's the same people who want to change the people at the top, to change drain the swamp. So I don't know that there's a split among the base, maybe among the elected officials, the elites, but I don't think there's this huge upheaval that's been this undercurrent of the Republican Party not following what its base wants. They're just throwing them a bone every once in a while. And I think that's why Trump got elected in the first place.
And I would happen to agree with that part of your sentiment, but at the same time, if it's been kind of, if they haven't been living up to what it is that they're supposed to stand for in the first place, and then Trump wouldn't it be fair to say then Trump actually might have even further deepened that divide? Actually, how when you're chopping wood and you end up with that last little piece that's still hanging on there and you're working at it to try and get the two parts to come apart. Could Trump have been the axe to finally split the party up?
I don't know. I don't see that momentum, but I hear people talking about it. But I just hope.
Well, here's the other thing too, and that is that he was also making noises about potentially running again in 4 years. And again, to kind of echo part of Brent's sentiment, I would have said a week ago that it probably would fly. Now I don't think it will. Frankly, the events of the past week and how he handled them is really, whether or not you agree with what the idea was. And I think the idea was that, he believes that there was an unfair election conducted. Now, we can decide, we can debate that all day, and that's not what I'm here to do. I'm just saying that's what he believes. In so doing, he went through the correct legal channels to challenge it, and none of them actually bore fruit. Now, we could also say that they didn't bear fruit because of some further power that is preventing it. We could debate that as well. All of that being said, set all of that aside, the way he conducted himself during that entire time period was just something that I think it's, if, for example, he is the commander-in-chief of the military. If he was a military man, he'd probably be brought up for court-martial on conduct unbecoming. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there is a way to go, I think I was robbed, I think I was ripped off, and say, look, I'm out here because on behalf of the American people, I think it's very important that we find out if there was a problem with our election. There's some evidence to suggest, other than having Lynn Wood come out and say that, did you see Lynn Wood, his attorney, was saying that Epstein is still alive? And I mean, it was just like, I'm watching him going, there isn't a judge that's going to want to listen to that guy.
No.
When Sidney Powell came out with all of her lunatic crap, why wouldn't any judges listen to her? Yes, this was created by, Venezuela for their elections. And it's not, if I were a judge, would I want that in my courtroom? So could that have been a reason that some of these judges, including the Supreme Court, didn't want to hear even the evidence? Troy, you're kind of, I go to you on this kind of stuff because you spent a lot of time looking into it and you have a particular passion for it. What do you think?
Well, first of all, Lynn Wood is not one of the president's attorneys.
Okay. I didn't mean to mischaracterize that.
He's doing his own thing. And
he's nuts.
Yeah, he's hurting more than helping, I think. But I think QAnon falls in a lot of that. All these QAnon conspiracies.
Right.
That whole QAnon phenomenon seems to be like a psyops operation. We're going to feed out a little bit of truth that we didn't really want you to know about, and we're going to pile a whole bunch of crap around that truth, and we're going to discredit it when it does come out. We just discredit the kernel of truth because we're going to feed you a whole bunch of other nonsense along with it.
Now, to be clear, you're not saying it is a psyop. You're saying this is what it looks like because it's such a train wreck.
Boy, yeah, look at how things seem to evolve with this. There's that kernel of truth. There's that Jeffrey Epstein. There was actually a ring of world leaders, of powerful people, but and that was like the original QAnon narrative. But they threw up a whole bunch of other crap around it, so when it comes out, you can just discredit it. That's what it. Now, do I know that's happening? But no, I don't. But that sure seems awful suspicious. That time after time, that seems to be the pattern of the way things come out.
Well, and I think I'll go to Brent on this one too. Brent, I think that it's funny to me that it's so easy to divide and manipulate people with a simple narrative that is specifically designed to attack their psychometric triggers, their emotions, by saying, look what the right did. And based on your information that you've gathered, your demographic, the way that we're manipulated by the CIA on down to the Washington compost, right?
I'm
using that from now on.
How have I never heard that? It's so blatantly obvious.
I know.
You never listened to Mark Levin.
No, I
Yeah,
don't.
that's a Mark Levin thing. It really is. I wish I could take credit for it. I think it's really funny, though.
I have brain cells left, and I'd prefer to keep them.
So as long as what you're saying is it targets the way this group feels, they're going to go, yeah. And those are the same group of people who say, yes, we need to silence these voices. Yes, we need to empower the same government that we all, both sides, left and right, agree our government is corrupt. Both sides, left and right, agree that our government rips us off and lies to us. Then they want to argue the degrees, right? So, I mean, what do you, this is, I think, and the reason, again, I went to you on this, Brent, is because, you are the resident anarchist, as it were. You recognize the incredible deep flaws in government and the way that people tend to legitimize government as a religion. So why the hell do you think that, I don't want to give government more power? That's nuts. So, where are you at with all of that?
Well, first of all, back to the Linwood thing. Linwood's nuts, but Nope, I'm going somewhere with this.
Okay.
I do greatly appreciate what Linwood was able to do for Nick Sandman with the CNN trial. Because he's the guy that got Nick.
Yeah, he did.
$300 million or whatever it was.
We don't know. It was actually undisclosed.
Yeah, but that was the speculation that it was that much, which really got to help put CNN in their place, and I really appreciate that. But aside from that, I wanted to get that in, but I didn't want to interrupt you when you were talking bad about him and Powell, because they're both nuttier than squirrel shit.
Nuttier than squirrel shit. Wow, that's good.
Yeah.
So again, what I'm really asking is that government manipulates us to give them more power.
Right. And
then we have two easily manipulated factions, and then you have the independents who are basically right up in the middle going, I don't think so.
So yeah, it's the left is better at it than the right is in regards to Machiavellian tactics. Mm-hmm. They do everything that they can in order to usurp all of the power that is at their whim and take any amount more that they possibly can in order to use it against their opponents. And they're very, very good at it. The right has been behind them for years on it. And
decades.
Yeah.
Long time.
The right may be better intentioned on certain things, but those intentions in themselves do not garner them the power that they need to actually act on those intentions, and they're constantly getting downtrodden as a result. Michael Malice is made a really good point where he says that conservatives are progressives driving the speed limit. So,
which I love. I think that's brilliant.
The things that progressives were screaming and yelling and wanting 20 years ago are the same things that conservatives are wanting now, that the conservatives were fighting tooth and nail against 20 years ago.
Well, let me rewind. Let me actually
that.
Let me interject something here, because I agree with you that the left's tactics are definitely more effective than the right's, at least now. So let's rewind to I'm probably arguably the oldest one here. And I remember very clearly the satanic panic of the 1980s, how that was actually not only driven by it was driven by right-wing religious types, but then it was co-opted by power in Congress.
Right.
So this was the one place where I think the right actually just beat the crap out of the left, because they were able to get arguments in front of Congress about censorship, about actually censoring these records or holding. I mean, I'm sure have you all seen Dee Snider talking to Congress about that?
Yep.
Dee Snider,
just masterful. John Denver, Frank Zappa. And I want to say, was it John Williams? There was a famous movie composer there too. I can't remember who it was.
I didn't know that. I knew about those three. I didn't know about a composer.
Paul Simon. There was quite a few, and I could be wrong. I could be wrong. So the point was that some of the discussions that Congress was having while it was being driven by the right were things like holding record label executives to account for young people who would kill themselves listening to a Judas Priest record, for example. So that is where. So maybe it isn't necessarily so much that the left is better at it, is that they have, as the right's arguments collapsed right along with the fortunes of Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, if you will. That's when all that stuff started falling apart, which essentially delegitimized what it was that they were attempting to do. Then throughout the 90s, it was really about it's funny because, what I remember very clearly about the 90s were the Bill Clinton scandals and the way the right tried to leverage those against a fairly righteous guy. Bob Dole wasn't a horrible human being by any means, but he got his ass handed to him by Clinton in 98. So I think the right was still trying to claim that power back that they had lost so badly when their own arguments just went to hell. Literally.
I seem to remember Tipper Gore being in the lead of that charge against music and
which is
censoring music.
I'm gonna move this just because it's right here. That is my Frank Zappa with Tipper Gore in the camel clutch.
Which is just brilliant. Yeah, and it was signed by Adrian Belew. That's so cool.
Adrian Belew and the Iron Sheik.
The Iron Sheik.
Which is the Iron Sheik your booty.
Sheik your booty.
So anyway, to kind of encapsulate all this, and then we're going to move on to the next thing here, is that I think what ended up happening it's funny because depending on who you ask, the culture wars only started 20 years ago. I disagree. Sure. They started much further back than that.
Long ago.
So the left actually right now has actually been able to take.
Hold on. The culture war started 20 years ago. Are people not familiar with the movement of the hippies?
Look, man, this is if you were to listen to a blowhard like Rush Limbaugh, he'd tell you it was 20 years ago. Right around when Bill Clinton was forgiven for his transgressions and yada 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 yada. You know what I mean? That's when that kind of stuff started. So
60s easy. 60s easy.
Right. It's funny because I've talked about this before, man. Tools have two ends. You know what I mean? You can actually use a gun to defend yourself or to murder a family. You can use a screwdriver to drive a screw or to put somebody's eye out. So the 60s, those cultural movements were absolutely, they were righteous in their intent. Mm-hmm. And over time, what had happened to those movements? They were co-opted by powerful forces, big companies, lots of money. So then when some of that stuff, like, for example, the first wave feminism, they were absolutely right. They needed to get equal rights. Once they had achieved largely those goals, it was like, now we're all going to be out of jobs. What do we do with this? I know. Let's go after, name X, Y, and Z so that the money could keep flowing, so the jobs could be maintained, so that people could still...
Capitalism.
Woke. Thank you very much. That actually, it's funny that you say that because in the 60s, it wasn't very different. Some of the younger upstart companies were actually not distanced themselves from it. Some of the Macy's, JCPenney, they were going, no, we're not having anything to do with any of this. Some of the younger companies were going, this is where it's happening. Madison Avenue was the big one because that was kind of the birth of modern advertising as we know it. And advertising really zoomed in on that stuff and was able to sell Coca-Cola and beer and cigarettes and all kinds of other shit,
And now you can watch a 2-minute long commercial about a black family with a gay kid doing this, and this. And at the end of it, it just says Oreos.
That's right. And
what are you trying to tell me?
I just watched a commercial like that. It's a 2 to 4 minute commercial from that. What's that service company? The Kohler company.
Igloo.
No, the one that's hot.
Yeti.
Yeti. Yes, Yeti. A 4-minute commercial on this mixed family, and they're traveling the country, and
then at the end.
Well, I finally got that deep into it, and I'm like, I have to just sit here and find out what the heck this is advertising because I can't figure it out.
Well, let's move on. A few nights ago, this was actually right after the Capitol. I am going to call it what it really is. There was a protest that turned into a riot, that turned into, but people are reframing it to be all kinds of different things, and we're going to discuss that. But what I want to do right now, because so many people misinterpreted what it was that I meant when I posted this. I have been known to be more eloquent than this, but I was very angry at the time. So I'm going to read it to you, and I'm going to read it to you as I intended it. keep in mind that what we're actually going to discuss what this, the specifics of this. Hey, America, you, yes, you did this. No, I am not saying Trump supporters did this. I'm not saying Democrats did this. You all did this. You are responsible for this. Well, the name calling, the admonishing of the other team, the belittling of your fellow Americans will continue, and power will continue to set you all against each other. You will continue to destroy more friendships, more families, more relationships, more marriages over your political differences. Rather than just listening to one another, and rather than trying to understand one another. You will continue to post your petty, insignificant bullshit on social media that makes you feel morally superior to those idiot Trump supporters, or those imbecile Democrats, or those backwards anti-science hicks, and those moron socialists. Then you know what comes? Yep, more violence, more grieving families, more dead Americans, more destruction of lives, the livelihoods of your brothers and sisters, more death, more burning, more looting, and more hatred. Then you know what? Once enough blood has been spilled, once enough businesses, homes, schools, and neighborhoods have been burned to the ground, once there has been enough grieving, once there has been enough sorrow, sadness, and catastrophe, then you will start trying to understand each other and work out your differences. So remember this. You did this. This is your fault. And since you just want to continue bullying one another, you will be responsible for cleaning this shit up. Thank you. Hey, all right.
I'll put it in a nomination for you.
Well, thank you. A nomination for what?
Dipshit of the year.
Dude, I mean,
Yeah.
nobody, dude, I won it so many years in the row, nobody even shows up anymore. It's just, in fact, they just mail it to me at this point, So, Troy, I know that when I posted that, you actually had, you had some criticisms for it, and I'm interested in discussing them with you. So, where are you at with this? What did you think of it?
Well, the main thing, we're both looking at the same events, and you're saying you, America, are responsible for this, and it's like, well, I don't completely disagree with you on that, but I'm looking at this event and I'm like, this is the failure of our leadership, of our establishment, that will pass unconstitutional laws, and the courts will say, no, that's fine, you can do that, and we can't unpeel things they do. No matter, take a decade, you can't undo these initiatives that are extra constitutional. And they sit there and they lie to us. And with this election, we've looked at some of the data analyst testimony and stuff. And it's like, obviously there's something wrong here that needs to be looked into. And I know we had talked, and you said, well, it'll be looked into. It'll be, things will eventually be taken care of. And I don't think I gave a positive reply, because I don't see that happen. I see less and less of even a willingness to acknowledge there's a problem, let alone to fix anything. And with that kind of entrenched power, I kind of felt you gave a short shrift to power, to the establishment, because there's a whole lot of the formula that is not in people's hands anymore. Or at least, for all intents and purposes, it doesn't seem to be.
Well, let's take that from. I'm gonna do something I practiced a lot when I was studying philosophy and critical thinking, and that is to take someone else's point of view that you disagree with and use it as an illustration to see if you can actually support your own idea, rather than to defeat your own idea. And we hear very often that, for example, an argument for reparations, we've all heard it, and that is this is a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. So if the government had engaged in slavery, engaged in redlining, engaged in practices that robbed specific groups of people from the same opportunities that the rest of us got, then we're all responsible for that, right? So what my argument was about was that we are not going, wait a minute, power is doing this to us. Instead, we're going, no, the Democrats did it to us. And then what people do is they get emotionally connected to that idea that the Democrats are to blame for power doing what power does. Just like the argument with the reparations is that people get attached to the idea that the American people are represented by this power that did it to us. Does that make sense? Am I making is that a good correlation? Okay, good.
No argument.
This is definitely playing into the power dynamics.
Right. And what's the power dynamic do? It's actually very simple. We're not that complicated. Generally, what they play on is our fear, because fear then manifests itself as anger. You see what I mean? So really, fear is really the only thing that people need to pull on, because then anger and sadness and other things come from fear. So let me circle back around. Then I'm going to go to you, Dustin, because you had some comments on it as well, and that is that. If we're going to look at power, because like I said earlier, both the right and left know the government screws us. They know it. So what happens is, because of whatever emotional connection to your party, to your ideology, to those evil Republicans, those stupid Democrats, like I said in my rant there, then you are setting yourself up to allow power to continue pushing you apart, to feeding you that garbage. Right now, when we listen to, I've seen it just yesterday. One of my longtime friends in his feed says, "That's it. No more Trump supporters on my page. If you voted for him, if you support him, if you ever defended him, unfriend me right now," unequivocally. And I'm going, why? So I started reading through the thread, because people were asking him that. And it's because that if you supported this man or voted for this man who he perceives as evil, then you must be supporting evil by, it's de facto. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? So, and if you want to boil everything down and make it that simplistic and that stupid, then you are getting the government you deserve, regardless of which side it comes from. We are responsible for putting them there. We're responsible for going, oh yeah, well, Obama did this. Oh yeah, well, Trump did that. And meanwhile, power is sitting there spending our money, making backroom deals, ripping us off. As you said, Troy, they're actually making extra constitutional deals, extra constitutional laws, and we're not paying any attention, because instead we're going, oh yeah, well, Obama said this and Trump said that, and they know. And this is the thing. This is why I get so angry about it, because they know it. This is what a political campaign is built on.
They both starved children in Yemen, so I really couldn't give a fuck less about what it is that they said on Fox or what it is that they said on MSNBC. They're both evil, useless pieces of shit.
I'm sorry. I'm kind of with you on this. I really am. If you want to encapsulate,
I can't
now
disagree.
Well, so let's go to you on this, because you did say you had actually some very eloquent points in the thread on this, Dustin, because you said, okay, I agree with you on these things, but these things maybe not. So what do you think?
Well, it's like we talked about before. It just kind of stems from moral superiority. So everyone on either side feels they're the most moral superior. Mm-hmm. So when you start putting that into effect, you call it closed ears, basically. But no one's going to listen to each other because they feel they have the moral high ground. And I think when we were talking about it, what you're referencing to was someone was asking how I could say what I said about having some mild admiration for them going into the Capitol building. Not the storming of it, but just them actually going in. And their response was, if I can remember it correctly, was that it's not the same compared to, those months of riots and stuff are basically accumulation of equity of rights, so to speak, where these people are just crazy. They're cultists. And from my perspective, it's like,
yep. How often have we heard that?
Yeah, but my perspective is that if I have a grievance with government, I'm not going to go burn over Wendy's. I'm going right to the government. That's
so. So what you're saying is that if you had that kind of resolve, if you actually believed, as the people who quote stormed the Capitol building believe, then it makes sense that they would have done so. I believe, Brent, you actually had a similar sentiment, did you not?
Yeah.
I did. And before I get into that, is Bleacher Dave Peters in the comments there?
Yes.
Yeah,
Of course
I
it is.
think
David, credit where credit's due. You've made two very solid points in a row, and I appreciate them both. The second point I'll expound upon just a little bit. It is partially Fox and MSNBC and their counterparts because they are the propaganda arm of the government. I won't say the Democratic Party or of the Republican Party. They are the propaganda arm of the establishment. They are telling you what the establishment wants you to believe to keep them in power. So I appreciate both of the points that you made there. You and I almost never see eye to eye, but when we do, at times like right now, you're absolutely 110% spot on. Back to your question / statement, Christian. I had a lot of admiration for what they did, not necessarily how they did it.
Yeah.
I will say what they did versus how what they did was portrayed, because it is vastly different.
Well, let's make sure that we're talking about the same thing, because I want to make it very clear. I personally do not support them breaking in armed to the Capitol building, rifling through the papers, stealing Nancy Pelosi's laptop. I don't care what they thought. I'm sorry, that's not working for me.
Okay, very few people were armed.
Agreed.
That is
no, and that's why I wanted to say that, because you're going to point out the distinctions.
Yes.
So, and this is important.
Very few people were armed. The people who went into McConnell's office and Pelosi's office and any other office and who took potentially sensitive data or Pelosi's laptop or anything like that, as much as the anarchist in me hates to say it, yes, they did wrong. They should be prosecuted for such.
Absolutely.
As much as I hate to say it, that's the truth.
Because whether you agree with the rules or not, you know them.
Right.
There is a way to do this.
The dude that took the podium, that was just hilarious. I'm sorry.
I thought it was actually kind of amusing, but I saw today that he was arrested, which I thought was even more amusing.
The thing that I thought that was the most...
I'm sorry. You know why it was funny? Because the dumb shit went like this and took a picture of himself. Yes. That's why it was fucking funny. What a moron.
Yes. The other thing that is probably photoshopped but made me laugh even harder was the fact that the podium was listed on eBay.
Yeah.
I didn't see that, and that's good.
The last time I saw it was up to like $28,000.
So let's go back to Troy here too, because now we've had some input, and you heard what I had to say on it.
Before we go to Troy, let me just clarify, because it was kind of I had some feedback that people thought I was actually in support of them going into the Capitol building, which, let me clarify. No, I thought it was bullshit. I thought they were a bunch of morons. My point was, I understand why they did.
No, I can understand why too, but would I say, look, I understand why you want to do that, but don't do it. That's where I'd be at.
And that was my point, but the conversation was thrown at me is it was like
you're a de facto supporter of that kind of violence.
Exactly. It's that typical nonsense, or it's a whataboutism. Not a whataboutism, I'm sorry. It's like, oh, well, they were doing this for 3 months and they did this. And it's like, look, each side has a problem. They each have a grievance. My point is I don't understand burning down a Wendy's when you have a grievance, but I can understand when you have a problem with the government.
That's where you would take it. Fair point.
Yeah. So, I can understand that.
I can just see how this is all going to be taken out of context, and somebody's going to make little sound bites.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Make me look like a retard.
Not that we're important enough just yet, but we might reach that point, so we need to be sure that we're as clear as we
And so when we talk about those factions and those moral superiority issues, my point is always like finding that understanding. So when I can understand what happened at the Capitol and why, but I can't understand what happened when a community wants to blow their own neighbor up because of things and reasons. That. For someone to be sympathetic to the one I don't understand is where I have to have evidence of conviction. Otherwise, it's a lost cause for me in a conversation. I need to have equitable understanding. So if this is the same as this, explain why. And if they're not, I need an explanation why.
Okay, let me say something that will absolutely be taken out of context, but it's the only context.
Oh, please.
It's on you if you do.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Brent. You can find me in Wisconsin. I just
Notice he didn't have the balls to give his address or phone number. That's okay. I'll give them to you after the show.
my phone number is 1-800-fuck you.
I have it on speed dial.
Hey, that's my phone number. How can we have the same phone number? How do we have the same phone number?
War of 1812 Part 2. I wish they had burned down the White House. Anyways,
yeah.
So
Exactly.
no. To your point, I can certainly understand why they did it. I can agree to an extent that they did it, but the way that they went around it and the fallout of it are astronomically terrible.
And what you're talking about is the dead woman and the police that were attacked and the 4 people who died and the property destruction and the divisiveness that the fact that it actually really did cause a scar for the country itself.
Right. Mm-hmm. Take all of that out. Every bit of it. As terrible as it is, you can take all of that out and just look at the optics. The optics were terrible.
Yeah, nobody's going to listen to these idiots anymore.
They took a movement that was galvanized amongst 75 million people. Right or wrong, there were 75 million of them that thought so strongly about the election, the results of the election, wanting a free and fair election, whatever it is. They were galvanized. They were steeled. That was exactly what they wanted. Now it's completely fractured. They're being ostracized and thrown out of every area of polite society, be it online or families or anything else. They're splintering because of this. And the optics of that and the fallout of that will be felt for years to come. And I honestly think that although Wednesday itself wasn't that big of an event compared to, say, a 9/11 or the Oklahoma City bombing or the Boston Marathon bombing or something like that, I do believe that this is another point in American history where we have hit a point of no return. And I don't think that there's any going back to I think January 6, 2021 will be known as a day of pre and post. There's a BC and an AD.
BC. Good point.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Troy, I'm going to let you wrap this one up.
Well, he said the optics, but I don't know if optics is the right word. I think it's more of the curated narrative, because as was pointed out earlier, we had a whole summer of city blocks burning to the ground, rioting, government buildings being taken over, which the CNN reporter is standing in front of a fire telling us mostly peaceful protesting.
We've all seen it. Mostly peaceful, and behind him the building's burning, and there's people running by with TVs under their arms and shit.
My favorite photograph of that was him standing in front of the Hindenburg disaster, and it said Hindenburg flight mostly successful.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites too. I love that.
Yeah, but one of the things I noticed on the 6th from the live video on the scene was that one video where the police moved the barricades away and just walked away.
Right.
And the crowd come rushing in.
I posted that very same video, and not only did they move the barricade and walk away, they moved the barricade, and as they were walking away, were motioning people inside. And there's no proof that was from that day at the Capitol. You don't have it in that.
That's a very good point.
But
true, there is no proof that it was that day.
I think there's narration or audio that does.
Show me something.
Does it? Yeah, that'd be cool.
Because he says that they breached the perimeter again. Like as he's standing there filming the cop move the barrier.
If you can lay hands on that and send that to me, I'd like to see it, because I posted that showing, hey, this is what seems to be have happened. So I'd like to have some more information to back that up.
Yeah, because right now the narrative is just they ran it like I have literal people who think they stormed they were like the beginning of that Megadeth video where they're just crushing through. Dun 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 dun.
Protest when these barricades they set up a perimeter, and actually this one in particular I'm thinking of was kind of a BS perimeter because the perimeter was often much further back, and at some point the barricades were just moved. Now I was near the barricades, but I was far from the center, so I don't know if a cop moved it or if the crowd moved it, but the security, they had moved back to another perimeter, and we were free to have that area. And that's the kind of crowd dynamics that goes on when that sort of thing happens, when you're in a crowd, surrounded by people, you don't have situational awareness beyond 5-6 people around you.
Yeah, it's true.
When the crowd moves, you move with the crowd.
Yep.
So
And
I
honestly,
definitely with that video, that doesn't seem to go along with storming the Capitol.
No, it doesn't.
Especially when these people are professionals. Anywhere in the country, there is a force that is used to protest. It should be in Washington.
There's protests in Washington, D.C. every single week.
And
every
should
week.
understand crowd dynamics and managing crowd dynamics.
but if you look at the crowd that was inside, they didn't look like a crowd that just fought their way inside and they're just like, yeah, we're here. They all were walking around taking selfies like, oh my God, I can't believe
walking between the blue ropes.
You know what's funny is that
it's really weird.
that I said to Kim the other day, it looked like a tour group. Almost. Well, look,
it looked like a group that was riled up that was like, yeah, we just fought a bunch of cops and got it. Yeah.
There were definitely, we obviously can't jump off track. There were definitely some people that were getting very aggressive and out of control. There's no doubt about that.
When I say that, I'm talking about like the 3 seconds of video where there's literally people just kind of going with their phones up, taking pictures. That's what I'm talking about, not the overall picture. Look,
yeah, I thought the new American Revolution was going to be fought with muskets, not selfie sticks.
Laser rifles.
The only point I'd like to throw in there is that when you let that perimeter collapse, you don't need 1,000 angry bad people who are up to no good. You only need a couple of those people.
Sure.
In that larger crowd.
Well, I have a question for you though. Okay, so look, I saw that video. I've seen people say, look, these DC cops essentially just went, come on in. I've seen people saying that. I've watched some of the video, and I'm still, as I like something that David says very often, and that is #be a skeptic. He reminds me very frequently that I need to, hey man, are you actually being skeptical of this? And 9 times out of 10, I am. From time to time, I get lazy.
That video actually happened on Wednesday.
Well, that was a good question. That's actually a very good point. Is that actually video from something else? Generally, though, I'd have to say that the internet sleuths have gotten pretty good at going, that was posted an hour and a half ago, and here, I found it. It's actually from 1985, after Reagan's shooting or something. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's very quickly debunked, So has anybody seen this debunked yet?
You mean the whole Freedom interview?
Yeah, the freedom thing too. Oh God, and nobody cares. Just okay.
Yeah.
So here's another thing. Hey Danny, how you doing? Daniel is here, a friend of mine from Vegas.
We should answer Tim at some point too.
I'm gonna answer you, Tim. Actually, I want to get to that, but some really good points have been made. I want to circle back around to something that Brent said in response to Troy. And this is something that David and I talked about. Is that having a legitimate movement being co-opted by an extreme version of that movement. And so, I think that's kind of, is what you were referring to, Brent. It's like you had these people with the right idea, and then a very small group of them now in the minds of Americans. You just said 70 million people, 75 million people voted for Trump. And now in the minds of many Americans, this tiny faction of people that took this idea, co-opted it, took it to the extreme, are now how people that voted for Trump are being characterized on whole. Yeah. Which does damage to what it is that they were trying to accomplish.
But you can also look at it this way. The people who stormed the Capitol could be looked at as Trump's strongest supporters. Wouldn't you believe? They took
agreed.
In order to support him.
If they were all Trump supporters, I don't.
Right. No. Let's assume that they all were.
Okay.
Just for the sake of the discussion, okay.
What did this gain them? This gained them
nothing.
Disavowing them on the strongest of terms and saying that they would all be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Not to mention the way some of the members of Congress responded. It was Lindsey Graham went, okay, that's enough. We're not actually going to do any investigations. We're not going to talk about it anymore. It's time that we wrap this up because we all look like fools, because it did damage to the Republican Party as well. And you could, you also had another one of these, some of the fallout that we can actually see is the Trump cabinet going, we're out. I resigned. Betsy DeVos resigned. Yeah, I mean,
one of his biggest supporters throughout his entire tenure, just gone at the drop of a hat. I can't do this. Bye. See ya.
We also had the president say Mike Pence, essentially, this is the biggest problem with Trump. When people say, well, what do you think? Why did he lose? Was it election rigging? I said, no, it's because Trump. That's it. Why did he lose? Because Trump. That's the only answer you really need to give. He stepped all over his own dick. Are people going to... I can actually list off a number of very important accomplishments the man had been a part of. A pretty significant list of things that actually got done with this guy that nobody else had managed to be able to do, and no one is going to listen to me. America is not. They're like, man, this is because again they tend to associate the small groups, like the right wingers want to associate BLM with riots. Well, small portions of the people in BLM may have been, or definitely are, responsible for those riots. But does it actually reflect the entire movement overall? No, of course it doesn't. That wasn't the point. You know what I mean? This is what I'm trying to say. Now, we could debate the extremes. That's not what I'm trying to illustrate the point that how long is it going to be before we can start talking about the good things that the president did again? It might be
closer to Middle East peace than we've ever been in the modern era. And no one gives
It's not being discussed.
I don't think we went to war in those 4 years, did we?
No. First president not to involve us in a new conflict since Eisenhower.
He dropped a shit ton of bombs and ramped up drone strikes.
He did. He actually at this point he actually dropped more bombs than Obama did.
Yeah, during his first 2.5 years.
Yep.
The last year and a half or so, he slacked off and he started doing really well in certain things. But his first 2.5 years were a dumpster fire. And
Do you think he did, Brent? Do you think he did that more on that's what was expected of him because he was new to the job? Because he's not exactly a politician. Or do you think he actually did that because he thought it was necessary? I'm just curious in your opinion because I wouldn't know. But
yes.
Yes.
Yes to both.
When it comes to Trump, it can be yes to both.
It could be two things could be true at the same time.
I can say this from the outside looking in because I don't like the man. I think he should be strung up on war crimes. I really, truly do. He's a terrible human being. He was a great president about 15% of the time. The other 85% of the time, he should be dumped in a vat of lava. But
so, how do you really feel about Trump?
All the politicians in Washington.
Yes, thank you. All of them. All of them. There's literally like 3 in Washington that shouldn't probably get the death penalty. But
not good odds.
I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm sorry. Take this out of context, fuckos. So, anyways,
Brent kills me, man.
His instincts were really great.
Yep.
On certain few things. And
on a number of things, actually.
On everything else, as you've said, he's a fucking buffoon. He's not intelligent. He's used to going into the room and being the alpha top dog and using that to his advantage. When he was president, he was certainly not the alpha.
Mm-mm.
No, and there were actually a few times where he alluded as such. And it was funny how he did it too, because I don't know if you recall this, but he did mention that there are people in the military-industrial complex who don't think very much of him.
No,
he almost said it quietly, and I was like, "Wow!" So, in other words, you're getting pushed back on really hard, aren't you? And because of your ego, you won't admit that you got your ass kicked by them. That's kind of the way I took it. Now, that's mind reading, and I don't engage in that shit. But that was the way I took it.
But to that point, he then brought on Bolton and Mattis.
That was stupid.
Mattis, I've got the utmost respect for. If you put that man on a battlefield, you will not find anyone who's better.
Agreed.
The man is a brilliant tactician. He's a brilliant commander.
But Bolton,
as a civilian leader, as the SecDef, he was one of the worst choices Trump could have ever made.
That's because generals have got to war. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm paraphrasing something David said.
Absolutely.
So let's not get too mired in this.
Yeah, let's.
I do want to actually answer what Tim said, because this actually came up today. I posted it on the Skeptic Tank page, and of course, I didn't offer. Generally, I will post a article and offer some sort of an opinion. In this case, I didn't. FBI finds that Antifa was not involved in the D.C. riots or the storming of the Capitol. So, and of course, the thread was predictable. We had some people that liked it and said nothing. Then we had a bunch of people going, so what? Now you trust the FBI? And I haven't answered any of them because I knew we were going to discuss it tonight.
Yeah.
My answer is, well, you seem to trust them when what it is that their outcomes produce is something you agree with.
Yes,
Don't
Bob.
you?
Sessions.
So no, and I get that. So that is my point. It's like, well, why can't we just take them on a case by case? And I read the article and I read their conclusions. I'm still being skeptical. I'm not sure. I think that again, the FBI, while they are fairly independent, they also have. That's why I said fairly.
Fairly.
As fairly as independent kind of means like mostly peaceful. Fairly.
There you go. That's actually a really good way to frame it.
Yeah.
So the other thing is I can say right now is that I haven't seen any evidence that they are lying. I haven't seen any evidence that their methodology was sloppy. I haven't seen any evidence that their methodology was good either. What I have is this news report that says this. The context is fairly clean. There's not a lot of hyperbole in it. It was fair, it was honestly kind of a boring piece when you're used to today. Trump went out and furthered his baseless claims.
I can prove that statement wrong immediately. Not your statement, but the statement from the FBI saying that wasn't there. They booked a guy from Utah who was.
They didn't say it wasn't there.
They
didn't say they weren't there. And so again, this is the interesting thing. So let's take a look at the article. Here's the context because that's the important part.
I'm going by memory, and I haven't seen it in.
So this is a topic. I think this is very important. So what it says is that no evidence. Here, I'm going to share my screen so you can see what's happening here. So we can go over this and this was kind of the bait that I threw out there because when you read it for what it says, it doesn't say one way or the other much of anything. That's why I was saying I have no evidence of either way. So let me share the screen. Share screen. Which screen am I sharing? This screen. Share.
Not the screen with the porn.
That one's over on the other side. So and it's actually the stuff. It's the stuff I borrowed from you, Brent. So it says that no evidence has been found that members of the left-wing Antifa movement were involved in this week's storming of the Capitol building, the FBI said Friday, contradicting a narrative pushed by some Trump allies. We have no indication of that at this time. The Washington Field Office Assistant Director Stephen D'Antuono, cool, said during a briefing when asked about any potential involvement of Antifa. The term is referred to used to the loosely connected network of far-left activists who say they are fighting against what they perceive as fascism. Really interesting framing because that's more honest than I usually see it, but at the same time, I don't think any of that was necessary. Acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Michael Sherwin, separately said Thursday that the investigators had not seen evidence of an Antifa presence. Several figures on the right have attempted to pin fault to the mob for the mob that broke into the Capitol on Wednesday on Antifa. Representative Matt Gaetz on Wednesday claimed that the left-wing agitators had disguised themselves as Trump supporters, citing a Washington Times story, with false claims that they later retracted. Representative Paul Gosar also suggested on Twitter that the riot had all of the hallmarks of Antifa provocation, like somebody couldn't copy that. While Fox News host Laura Ingraham gave air to the baseless conspiracy on television, blaming Antifa for apparent instances of right-wing violence and claiming such members of creating false flags has become a popular deflection for some conservative allies of the president. Among those who have been identified from the Capitol riots are white nationalist and QAnon shaman Jason Tankersley and Nick Oakes, founder of the Hawaii chapter for the far-right Proud Boys group, among others. So again, what does it say? What does it really actually say? All it says is that as of now, we don't have any evidence of that. It didn't tell us how long the investigation is ongoing. It didn't tell us what they've discovered so far. There was no method posted. There was no, this is why we think this. This was not a statement, a press release by the FBI. This was somebody from the Hill calling the FBI and saying, hey, can you comment on these things? And what we got was, so far, we don't have any evidence of that. So
So
what I
far.
bet is being left out is I can't comment any further because it's an ongoing investigation. I'm willing to bet that that's why we aren't seeing any more details. But they conveniently leave that kind of stuff out because, it sells papers and generates clicks. So what do you guys think?
Am I here?
That sounds
I dropped out for a minute.
it sounds hard to swallow that there was no provocateurs there when we have, and this was it's supposed to be a major event. When we have minor events with video evidence, undercover video of these political operatives paying people to show up and be provocateurs at events like this, it's kind of hard to believe.
That's true.
If they would do that for some, Trump rally a few years ago in some, smaller state, then I kind of find it hard to believe that they wouldn't be doing something in Washington, D.C.
Well,
Real quick, to interrupt. Am I here? You
Yes.
guys hear me? Okay.
Yep.
I dropped out.
Well, I don't know. I mean, are you talking about in the philosophical sense?
No.
Or
You all cut out. I couldn't see you, and I had to disconnect my VPN to see if that actually would work. And
Yeah, it dropped for a second. By the
You're
way,
back, unfortunately.
if you actually get VPNs in order to not be tracked, they track you. I know this. I'm a network security specialist.
We'll talk
They
after.
they sell you that crap, and believe me, I can follow you around no problem.
We'll chat after this.
Okay, cool. I'm just letting you know.
And Dave, yes, I know the difference between them. I don't know that the other three do.
So actually, I don't. Actually, what is hey, David, do you want to chime in here, man? Open up your camera and join us, you bonehead. Let's go. I think it would be really interesting to hear from you on this stuff outside of your generally snarky comments in our chat. So I'll say if you want on, say the word, and I'll send you the link. I don't know who the black bloc is.
As one troll to another, I don't like competition, so I think that's been.
So look, the point that I'm making here is that I'm not saying that Antifa didn't do it, and I'm not saying that they were a part of it. What I'm saying is that so far I don't have enough information for me to offer a solid opinion. And frankly, the way I operate in pretty much everything I do is that I have to have information first. Otherwise, I'm just pulling it straight from my ass, which is what most people do. And I am truly trying to distinguish what it is that we do here from most people. You know what I mean? So,
well, we do know that, for one, it wasn't all just because we were talking about earlier. It wasn't all just Trump supporters. That is confirmed now. We did have a guy from my home state of Utah make an appearance there inside the Capitol with everybody else.
That's the guy who I was referencing.
Yes. He's actually responsible for setting up a BLM protest in Provo, Utah, which resulted in someone driving through the protest getting shot.
okay, so okay, but at the same time, is this person identified as Antifa?
No,
Self-identified.
that he's not Antifa. But the whole point is we don't know if Antifa's there yet, but we do know that it's not just Trump supporters.
Okay, fair enough. And see, that's again the distinction. This is the word games that are played on us every day.
Yes.
This is how these things are framed to us, which actually, I'm sorry, I was distracted for a second here, but we're actually getting quite a bit of chat here. So,
and it does look like David wants in.
does he? You want to hop in, David? Okay.
He asked, "How do I do it?" Send him the link.
Okay, cool. I'll send you a link, buddy. 1 second. We're going to bring in David Peters, who actually, you know what? I'm going to preempt. I want to say that David is one of my favorite trolls in the world. He's also one of my favorite people. So I have a great deal of respect for him, and I'm going to, just as I do for you guys. So I'm actually, this actually should turn very interesting very quickly.
No, I'm actually.
I know. I'm not saying that any of you feel differently. I'm just actually trying to set up a little introduction for the guy. You know what I'm saying? So let's see, David. Here you go. Hop on in. So anyway, so again, what I'm saying here is that is it possible? First of all, one of the things that Antifa does way better than anybody is they do have leadership, but we don't know it. We generally don't know who they are. They cover their faces. We don't. They actually. Have you seen the shields that they carry around? with the big A on the front in red, etc. Have you seen these? Those cost about $200 to make. Somebody's making them, but we don't know who, which suggests that they're manufacturing these things inside their own organization. Proud Boys, on the other hand, go on TV. We know what their names are. They actually identify who is in their hierarchy, who's the president, who's this chapter leader. We don't know that about Antifa.
Vastly misunderstood.
So the Proud Boys, well, as of late, they've made some distinctions that have made my defenses of them, or my explanations, let's say, because I've done some research into who they are.
Oh, I can tell you the history of the Proud Boys.
Me too, actually, starting with Gavin McInnes and it was a joke. It was actually, he thought it was funny.
They started on Compound Media, which is a network that I'm a proud subscriber to. It's just Anthony Cumia from the Opie and Anthony show. It's his network. Gavin McInnes show on there. And one day he decided to start a joke club called the Proud Boys, where they were going to
which was actually a play on the
song "Proud of Your Boy."
The Proud of Your and the Lost Boy. He said that he was watching the Robin Williams version of Peter Pan.
Yep.
Lost Boys. And then the song "Proud of Your Boy," and he thought it was so funny to David. Here we go, and we're going to add him in. David Peters, ladies and gentlemen. The crowd goes wild. Can you hear me? Yo, are you?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, just fine. How you doing, bud?
All right, cool.
Good to see you, man.
I'm well,
How you doing?
man. Thank you for inviting me in.
I'm glad you're here, man.
This is a very well measured conversation. I've got just the wrong opinion about you.
I know you do.
And so
we've talked about that. Well, Brent's actually,
I just saw the four of us. I didn't see him. I got him now.
Oh, okay, cool. So, as I was saying, I don't know if you heard it, David, because you were prepping to get in here. As I was saying, that I cannot comment with any information here that Antifa was there or they weren't, because there isn't any. There is speculation. There isn't any solid proof. Have you seen the pictures that are going around? I want to say that I know that I shared it with these three. I don't think I shared it with you, David. Actually, somebody was claiming that a tattoo on the hand of one of the guys who was photographed next to the shaman was a hammer and sickle, and it turns out it was, and it was actually a logo from a video game.
Yeah.
So it's and which could be arguably still, how many Trump supporter gamers are there that would get a tattoo of the game on their hand? You know what I'm saying?
The guy is apparently known as Q Shaman or QAnon Shaman or something like that.
That's right.
He's not Antifa.
No, he's not. So that being the case, let's have an intellectually honest conversation about what we know. Frankly, we don't know enough, and that leads me to think that it's possible, sure, for me to say definitively one way or the other. I can't.
No, I wholeheartedly believe that there were some Antifa there, just because of the fact that there were thousands of people there. There's bound to be a few, but I don't think that they were the main perpetrators of the people running to the Capitol. Of course not.
This is why
it's not their tactics. What happened at the Capitol and what they normally do don't reconcile. It's not the same.
Well, this is okay. Fair point. And this is also what I was saying, David, just before you came in. I was saying that what Antifa does really well, that the right wingers don't do very well at all, is they keep their numbers hidden. They keep their leadership hidden. They keep their funding hidden. They keep their tactics hidden.
They're organized.
They keep their identities hidden.
Yeah, and so we don't really, it's easy to speculate that they are really just the loosely, kind of not really affiliated group that the press has reported to us that they are. But I'm sorry, I don't think so. I just think that they're just as good at there's mafia tactics involved. The mafia didn't exist either. The only way that they could actually find a way to prosecute the 5 families, if you remember, was by creating a law out of thin air called RICO. That's the way they were able to pull all of these people together and say that collectively as a group that they were guilty of something, right?
And Rudy Giuliani had much better hair dye at the time.
I think we lost David. He's frozen.
I thought he was just stoically looking to the right.
Yeah, so did I. I was like, It's a good side. It's the best side, in fact. It was a good pose. I liked it.
It was a good. Actually, the profile was actually pretty good. That should have been.
It was a very good profile.
Yeah, that should have been his Facebook picture.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's
really
kind of move on past that until he jumps back in, because I do want to get his take on black. I want to hear about the black bloc. I want to hear, he's had some stuff that he's been sharing as the stream went on, so I want to hear from him.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about.
We should address some of Tim's issues, because I don't think we've addressed any of them yet.
Well, I think we just did.
Tim seems like he really wants us to. He's got a lot to talk about.
Well, let's see. In terms of Antifa, we are living Antifa, even if we don't agree on anti-First Amendment is an extra. That's an interesting point. I think it's pretty fair to say that nobody here supports fascism.
No,
David wants me to
nobody supports fascism. No, nobody does. Who?
Well, that's not true. They don't support fascism.
There he is.
Name.
Yeah,
I know plenty of people that support fascism intact, but if you were to ask them if they were fascistic, they would say,
yeah.
When you take a fascism practice out and you present it to them, and do you believe we should shut down this kind of speech? And they do agree with that.
Most of the people that I know that self-proclaim themselves as being sympathetic to Antifa are the most fascistic people that I know, but they will never admit it. They don't understand the meaning of the word.
Well, because again, Antifa, David, I don't know how much of this you missed or you caught, but I was talking about how great what Antifa does really well that the right does not do well at all is hide themselves.
Yeah.
They protect the sources of their funding, they protect their numbers, they protect their leadership. We don't really know. I'm sure that the FBI knows about their structure, but they don't. The right just comes right out, man, like those idiots that wear the Hawaiian shirts. Hey, look at me. I'm a right-wing moron. You know what I mean? See, like Brent, he just raised his hand. Well, that's because he wears those kinds of shirts.
Magnum PI.
But that is actually where they excel. You got Proud Boys who, like, for example, what's the de facto president out of Texas? What's his name again? He's
Rico Torre.
Rico Torre. He's got pictures of him standing next to Ted Cruz and, that kind of thing. You wouldn't see Antifa members doing anything like that. Nope. Which gives them far more of an advantage and a great deal more power. And it also, and the advantage and the power.
My Machiavellian argument. They're far more Machiavellian and far more powerful in that regard than anyone on the right could ever hope to be.
Agreed. The right tends to want to be really they want to flaunt their stupidity, if you ask me. But David, you had mentioned something earlier about the black bloc. What I'm not familiar with it.
Oh, so Brent, help them out. When you see the A on the shields, that's the anarchist A.
Well, I know that.
Right, and so these dudes are black bloc. When you see, if the anarchists were in the Capitol building, if they could have left that A circle in there, that would have been irresistible. That would have been irresistible.
Absolutely.
So I don't.
The beacon of the cathedral, quote unquote. Why,
right.
Why would you not leave your symbol there to say, "Hey, I was here"?
How could you not? And so I don't think. And so one of the things that makes me. So I have been in so many protests, right?
Mm-hmm.
From the time we were protesting the divestment, South Africa divestment on UCLA's campus, and the Wobblies came in and took over. We were occupying the administration building, and the Black Student Union membership was like, this is about to get serious. Let's go, because the Wobblies have shown up, and they were like, tearing shit up. And we were students, and they're like, there's only a handful of Black students on this campus. Don't get kicked out of school. Let's go. And so, but they convinced me to occupy this building because what they were saying was so persuasive. And so I sat in there for a while, and I realized, I'm gonna be in trouble. And so I left, and then I've watched those kind of same people become anarchists. And so in the Occupy movement here in Oakland, man, they took over Occupy and they trashed this city. We are sick of them tearing shit up. Sick of it.
Very interesting.
And I look at these fools, and now they come out sometime under the Antifa. It's the same people. Some of them are the same people. They come out sometime under the Antifa banner. But when they come out under the Antifa banner, I think it's more to directly combat Proud Boys. They want to fight.
Yep.
When they come out under the Black Bloc banner and they're wearing, because they cover themselves.
They got the balaclavas and the helmets
Yeah,
and the whole gear. Yeah, they essentially they got riot gear.
They got riot gear, and their sole thing in these things, this happened all summer in Oakland, is to provoke the crowd.
Right.
And so they will come in a crowd and peep and they do, and I've seen the videos, the placing of the bricks, and I don't know if these are manufactured or whatever, but it's their tactics. And so they will take the righteous indignation of this crowd, and once it gets dark, they will whip it up, and then they will go and
then they're ghosts. They disappear.
Yeah, they bust it and they leave, and then like the earnest protesters get kettled by the police, and then they get blamed for the stuff that the provocateurs do. Of course, they were in the crowd. Because it's what they do. And so if you are trying to, so I'm thinking of this way, now help me out here. And so if I'm an anarchist, if I'm an Antifa, if I want to cause, if I'm a Russian, if I want to cause chaos, if I want to weaken the governmental, if I'm an anarchist and I want to weaken the governmental structure, I'm coming into every crowd I can and I'm provoking. Because the more you can get people to tear stuff, it doesn't matter left, right, up and down. They just want to have chaos.
Okay,
so
dig this.
Protests, I think they're there.
Dig this. This is let me just because I got something very specific. We all of us here watched on TV the ongoing protests in Seattle and in Portland and all over the country. Really, one of the things that I remember very specifically in the Seattle protests, or was it? No, it was actually Portland. Was the news soundbite of. It was like a group called like Moms for Freedom or something along those lines. See, David knows exactly what I'm talking about. This is a tactic. This is where they go, okay, man, the news is going to be here. They made shirts in advance that said like Moms for Freedom. They put them on the female members of these groups. They also went around saying, will you wear a Moms for Freedom shirt so you could be on TV? Et cetera, et cetera. They're passing these things out so that moment when they were about to blow shit up, as tear shit up, as David just said, this is when these people were like, and so how did the news report it? These were just moms that were out there standing up for freedom and what they believe in for their children's futures, right? So that it takes all of the heat off of who actually was there. Yeah. So at least that was my interpretation. Did you see that, David? You know what I'm talking about?
So you know that group got discredited by the black people, and so Moms for
whatever the hell it was.
Yeah, that Moms group was for real. It was a grassroots.
So they co-opted
that group. So at some point along the way, the black people were like, "You are pimping us." Right, you start doing all this crazy shit that we don't agree with and making us look bad and distance themselves from them. Because how many? I mean, you guys you guys been in protests, right?
No, I haven't.
I largely believe they don't work, so I don't typically waste my time.
Yeah, I'm kind of it's in the COVID. I'm not going in crowds. But if you turn a camera on people, I wave my arms and scream. This is, of course, everybody wants to have some celebrity. So this is very effective. So we had a Moms for Housing group here, right? And this moms thing in Portland, I'm sure, is playing off that. And it garners people's sympathy. And they're fighting right now. So what did I do? I founded Grandmas for Housing because I'm trying to counter them. Right? I'm like, okay, I'm gonna up you. And so, this is the commercial. You posted something about marketing, and if you can convince, it's that whole marketing shit. Yep. Convince people of shit that they don't need, and then that whole thing, that manufacturing consent.
So that was the Chomsky book that I was talking about, Manufacturing Consent.
That's Chomsky, yeah.
Let me ask you just to make sure that I've got my own understanding, because as the quote unquote resident anarchist here, it's because of groups like Black Bloc and such that I don't refer to myself as an anarchist unless I'm in company that I know will understand what I mean by my personal brand of anarchy. By my personal brand of anarchy, I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I'm a hardcore libertarian. I want to be left alone. I want to be left alone. I want to leave others alone. I want any and all things in life to be voluntary. I don't believe in coercion. I don't believe in forcing anyone to do anything that they're not willing to do. I don't believe in violence unless violence is brought upon you. Then you defend yourself with everything that you've got. Don't initiate violence, but be prepared to do violence if it's done upon you. That's my brand of anarchy. Unfortunately, because of these idiots running around with their masks on, throwing Molotov cocktails, whenever I call myself an anarchist in certain company.
Yeah.
So depending on who I'm around, I'll say I'm either an anarchist or I'm a strong libertarian. But so my understanding between Antifa and Black Bloc is Black Bloc strictly anarchists. They want to burn the system down at every turn that they possibly can, no matter what. They don't care. Tear it down. I can sympathize with some of that. However, I can't sympathize with their tactics. My understanding of Antifa is there are members of Black Bloc who are members of Antifa, but there are also progressives, Democrats, people from all walks of life who are part of Antifa, who might not necessarily be anarchists. They're just in Antifa because it's Antifa, anti-fascist. Whereas I don't know a single member of Antifa who's actually anti-fascist. They may call themselves anti-fascist. They may truly believe that they're anti-fascist, but it's because they don't understand what fascism is. Because the biggest tenet of Antifa that I've seen so far is the stifling of political speech that doesn't agree in lockstep with whatever they believe. And that's
well, then yeah, speak to that, David, because you and I have actually mixed it up a couple of times in threads about that. You're like, okay, what's not anti-fascist about Antifa? And so sometimes, man, I got it, and you know this. Sometimes I know when you're trolling, sometimes I don't. So if you could speak to that, I'd be interested in if you have a perspective on it.
So I have no freaking clue what a textbook definition of fascism is, right?
Nobody does.
Well, that's because there's not one. There's an amalgamation.
Well, there is and there isn't, you know. But truly, David, to speak to that directly, I recently read a book that was written by Jude. What's his? Oh man, Jude Gold.
Hey Jude. I think Jude was his last name.
No, actually, it was Jude Gold. Anyway, he started it it was a history book on Antifa or on fascism, and he was saying nobody really has a definitive definition, you know, for fascism. Anyway, please go ahead. I just wanted to interject that.
So, and I can only because see, I don't follow this daily national political back and forth,
and you're a better person for it.
I find it a complete waste of time, right?
Mentally taxing. So
yeah, I'm like, this is pointless, right? I got stuff I'm trying to do locally, right, and make an impact. I don't have time for because we just talk past each other, and so
I'm completely against politics, but I think that in any case politics were to ever work, local is the only place they matter.
And I tell my city. People on my city council, I despise politics. Because anyway, I don't even want to go down that path yet.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
David, of all of us, is actually pretty directly involved in this stuff. I know that you are, as you actually asked earlier, who's been in protests. I know that Troy has. He's been out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have no experience with Antifa on the ground. And so I found myself, I found myself in the summer. It was a massive car caravan. Oh my God! It was the whole city. Half of the city was paralyzed by our cars. And when and so look. Here's my favorite memory of that. It was the only time in my life I experienced black privilege. I had
right on.
I had white people in cars stopping, going, go in front. I got all the way up behind the speaker trunk because it was like, after you. I was like, fuck. It's supposed to be like what it is when you're white and go to the bank. I got out of my car at one of the speaking places, and dude spoke, and I'm fucking pissed because they tore up my fucking city, right? And I'm yelling, stop tearing, where are them damn arrogant? And then all of a sudden I heard some voice behind me go, we're right here. Dude, I turned around. There were like fucking 150 people on bikes all dressed in black, right? But none of them are claiming. I have seen nobody claiming Antifa here. I've seen nothing about Antifa.
But they don't. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But I
They're
think
they're trying to
really
be a
bad.
ghost, man. They're a freaking specter. They're a phantom. That's the
I
idea.
don't know. I
They
think
don't
the
get.
black-
Have you ever seen them actually go on TV and say we're Antifa? I haven't.
On
the
TV,
people in
no,
city
I've
shadow-
absolutely seen signs and stuff like that.
Sure, but
Yeah.
anybody talking about it? So to your point, David, couldn't I just like make an Antifa sign, walk up and say, "Here, hold this"? You know what I'm saying? To again hide the numbers, hide it. Maybe I'm actually, maybe I'm not understanding the
Yeah,
tactics.
well,
so
see, I guess my point was, those guys are anarchists at night. And so I was like, don't come out here at night and tear shit up because we're getting blamed for it. He's like, we're with you. I'm like, stop tearing shit up. But I'm sure that when nightfall came, they suited up, put on all their black shit, and spray painting that anarchist A and was tearing shit up. And so I guess the point I'm making is I don't believe those people identify as Antifa. I believe those people act and identify as anarchists, and I think that anarchists are much. Contrary to I think what you're saying, but I think the anarchist group the Black Bloc group is much bigger and much well organized. Because I am going back to the Seattle WTO.
I don't
protest.
disagree with you at all. I mean, if you listen to Tim Pool, he was talking about how Black Bloc was on the ground during Occupy Wall Street, and that was 10 years ago.
Yeah, I seen it Occupy in Oakland. Yeah.
So let me ask
They
you
were,
this.
they were running around Europe 10 years before that.
That's true. Yeah. So let me ask you both this, or all of you, collectively here. It seems to me, David, you and I talked briefly off air last week about groups that are co-opting genuine movements. I think we talked about this briefly earlier about the people who actually showed up in D.C. to peaceably say, hey, we think that we've been screwed in this election, and then that was co-opted by a small group of people that are now going to be reflective of the entire group regardless. You had mentioned something to me about that happens a great deal to genuine causes that you believe in and are fighting for.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear you say things like stop tearing shit up, don't do it in our name, because this is something that we have actually discussed here. Is that no, there's people out there who are really actually just trying to have their voices heard. And then another group of people comes in and says, hey, we're do-gooders. We're going to pretend we're going to do this in your name. And they actually create problems for those genuine movements.
I live 45 minutes outside of Minneapolis, and I can guarantee you with 100% certainty that happened here during the summer after the George Floyd riots. Now, were there people from Minneapolis that were fucking Minneapolis up? Yes. But do I think that they were wholly responsible for it? Not even a little. Not even a little.
So again, based on what I was saying earlier, and you all know what my general theme is that we're all very easily manipulated unless we're thinking very carefully about what it is we're being told. Do you think some of this is actually a government power, or is it just private? Some of these tactics are very CIA. You know what I mean?
It sure seems CIA.
I think either the government is sending people in to do things who may be in government employ, or they're sending people in on their behalf to do some things. But on the other end,
I mean, I don't want to open up like a can of conspiratorial bullshit. I'm just curious to see what you think.
Sure, but on the other end of it too, there was a ton of evidence that people were coming over from Chicago and Kansas City and stuff like that into Minneapolis when it was such a hotbed after George Floyd, because they knew that they could come up here and go nuts and just destroy a city without having to wake up the next morning and say, my God, what did we do to my town?
When I'm sitting here thinking about strategically and logically, if you're really not a part of that group, but you go and burn a bunch of shit down in the name of that group, how does it benefit your group? Does your group really not have a name other than just mayhem and chaos?
I don't think they care. I think it was people being a shut-in after COVID and being locked down in certain places throughout the country for, I think, month and a half, 2 months.
I think it takes a certain level of organization and courage that would go well beyond simply being irritated and bored.
I think it's a political strategy that makes perfect sense to me, and I'm going to contradict myself and say I agree with some of it.
Okay, what parts do you agree with?
There has never been any move toward greater racial justice without violence. It is required.
Okay, all right.
It is required. You pick any movement forward and it was violence engendered it. And so, this marching shit don't work. People have been marching and dying for 500 years. It doesn't work. America only understands violence, and I think the Black Bloc people understand that. Political. I mean, we saw anarchists in 1890 throwing bombs. They understand the political use of violence.
And
I think, and you're talking about the progressive movement, yeah.
And I think Haymarket and Saki, all those dudes I learned in elementary or junior high school, whatever the hell it is.
Sacco and Benzetti.
Those dudes, yeah, World War I, all these dudes. And so I think Americans don't understand these days the political use of the political use of violence. And if you Mao, all political power comes from the barrel of a gun. Mm-hmm. Frantz Fanon, violence is purifying. We must have violence to make a society just. Violence is American patriots use violence. Violence is a required.
It was founded in violence.
Right, and so if I'm I don't know anything about anarchy, but if I just think about it, violence is their method to cause chaos, and so I'm not surprised when they use violence, when they engender violence from any other side, because just like the Russian campaign to turn us against each other, it's all the same thing.
Well, wait a minute. Are we being desensitized to it? Is the point of it getting lost? Because I agree with you in terms of the history. I'm familiar with the history, of course. So these days, though, we see it so much. And now there are, rather than a sympathetic public, we have a divided public that are ready to go to war with one another. And any actual just cause that might be involved will get lost in the I'm right and you're wrong shit that is going on. So is that actually going to, if it is about racial justice, let's say that, that this is a valid concern that we all agree needs to be dealt with, and so violence is being committed in its name, are we actually hearing about it? Because I can tell you, George Floyd was killed, suddenly the world explodes, right? 2 months later, nobody remembers why. So, and I think that to your point, historically those things were effective. These days we have a 24-hour news cycle. We have competing sets of corporate news outlets that are pointing their fingers at one another and the people that watch their shows. We have a complete adjustment in the way that journalism is conducted. We don't really see real journalism so much anymore. Now it's actually characterizing and editorializing and framing so that the people that consume their product continue to consume their product. That being said, is the cause lost in all of that?
Look, I'm gonna be pragmatic. This shit's working. We're making progress. There's more white people than ever that come out in these protests, right? And
but is it because of violence, or is it because of what we're seeing? Because now we're all. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that. Well, and because we also have forums like this one where we can all get together.
Let me make my point.
Okay, please. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So there are billions of there's probably hundreds of millions of foundation dollars that are suddenly available to nonprofits doing community work. I'm trying to market my accounting practices. Hey, look, I got a Black liberation accounting practice. I'm the only Black firm around here. If you are about empowering Black communities, you will employ me. I called into a defund the police listening session today. Why is that happening? We was marching forever. It didn't change until we started tearing shit up, right? Ferguson changed their laws around ticketing. They made it illegal to collect, I forgot, more than 15% of your municipal revenues from traffic tickets. Why? Because they burnt the fuck down out of Ferguson and they got to the rot underneath it, the systemic reasons around why these things were going on. This does not happen when you go politely to the city council. Capitol reacts when you start burning their shit up, right? It's the only way so far to get to justice. And this is the problem with capitalism. When you tell Black people that you're a communist, if you're out here marching, I'm gonna be a communist. Bring it on. Because
Fair point.
if that is when we've seen this in America forever, King was a communist, Robeson was a communist, and they generally Du Bois was a communist, and they generally became communists.
I was going to say Du Bois actually was a communist.
Yeah. So but you got to look at his evolution. How did he get there?
I think that dude needs to be taught in every elementary school, man. What he did was a big deal. Outside of his ultimate, journey to communism, he was the very first person to go into those inner cities to talk to those black families and take surveys and generate data on how many people were living in their homes, how many people were working, why they were fired, what their level of education was. No one would do that until he had the courage to do it. That's some important shit.
I've got 2 questions, and then I want to bow out for a bit and let Troy and Dustin add or take away anything from this if they want to. But my first question is, going by, I believe it's Tim Pool's numbers. I could be wrong on the numbers, but I know they have gone down. I'd like to know your opinion of it. So pre-summer riots, let's just say pre-George Floyd, everything popping off in regards to that. BLM, their
support for BLM went through the roof. It actually tripled, and then over time, it actually dropped to lower than it was previous to the riots.
Right.
That was kind of why I was asking you that question, David, in terms of is it working?
So I'll let you respond to that, and then I have a second question. But go ahead with that. I'm curious to what.
So the CEO of my publicly traded company, I texted him. I sent him an email article one day because I couldn't function after George Floyd. I couldn't. I was trying to work. I couldn't concentrate. It was I sent him a note. I saw an article. It said, "Hey, check on your black colleagues because they're probably not okay." And the dude responded to me, and he started a task force to try and do something, which has gone nowhere. But the fact, and maybe I'm getting this wrong, it was the killing and not the violence. That's an interesting question. And so here's what I believe. I believe cities, municipalities, when you tear them down, then they become more amenable to changing the systems of policing. I don't think marching causes that to change, but it has a negative impact on public opinion. And so what's the goal? Do you want public opinion or do you want policy change?
So let me actually interject something here.
Public opinion be damned as long as change comes along.
So let me interject something because I think this is relevant. Troy actually and I mixed it up a little bit back and forth on Skeptic Tank when we were talking about what I said to you, Troy, because you were very angry about about all of this evidence of voter fraud not turning into something, it being swept under the rug by power, essentially, right? And what I said was, don't worry, things will change because it changes quietly after the storm. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about here, David. It's like all this shit burnt down and stuff. But the people in charge can't ignore it, even if the fucking public no longer gives a shit about it. The people in charge are going, this cost us too much. This fucked up way too much stuff here. So that's what I was saying to you, Troy, is that what I believe is going to happen is quietly, I said this to you too, David, in a private message, I think today or yesterday, is that investigations will continue. They will do so quietly. It'll be a little bit off the radar. I also can almost predict word for word what the outcomes are going to be, is that we did find that there was evidence of problems. They're not going to say that there was fraud. They won't use that term. Government never admits that they have fucked something up. Yes, and so what we have identified with our cumulative efforts is poor methodologies and security problems with the way the states are conducting their elections. So as a result, there will be hearings, and then those hearings will eventually lead to trying to right now we got 50 states with 50 different sets of statewide election laws, right? Ultimately, the federal government is going to say, look, because the federal government can't force them to do it, the Constitution doesn't allow it. But they can say, we will provide you with funding for an additional uniform security code for our elections moving forward. It will change because of this. Now, this is, and I think that's kind of what you're talking about, is that, after the storm, the shit actually does end up start moving someplace. So the question then really becomes, so then the violence at the Capitol could then also be excused as a part of something that will end up being changed, couldn't it?
Well, that was my second question.
David's going, yep.
Do you think the people at the Capitol, regardless of whether you agreed with them or their methods, because I know just based on the little I know about you that you probably don't agree with anything that they did or anything that they did.
Understatement.
Go ahead.
Do you believe that they should have been more violent in order to get the ends that they wanted?
Absolutely.
Wow. Very
Absolutely.
interesting. That is
My respect for you just went up.
Seriously, I told you that after I talked to him.
I agree with you on a lot of things, but you're intellectually honest, and I cannot say that about many people, and I appreciate you and that.
Dude, look, I grew up in an environment of black. Oh, look at my damn thing.
No,
I grew up in a group who took up arms against the United States government. Right? These dudes were calling for violent, revolutionary. Huh?
I said, can I come?
Well, most of them got murdered, right?
There are worse things to happen, I guess.
Because I'm a better troll than most, but most of the stuff has a grain of truth, and so I know, these Panthers are ready to die. Huey's autobiography, one of his autobiographies, is Revolutionary Suicide.
And you'll never find anyone more dangerous who is willing to die for what they believe.
That's exactly it, man. You saw what the hell happened in Cuba. And so if these people are really believe, and they really genuinely believe, but to me it was like, oh, we got in. Oh, shit, what do we do now? They weren't steeped in, they had.
So you're saying
hardened.
These were rank amateurs, basically. Holy shit, we got in. Hey, selfie. All right.
So when you got elected officials, there were some dudes, I guess some skinheads and some other kind of hardcore dudes, but look at the background to some of them. They were like, wannabe, disco dudes. They're not, they hadn't been deprived enough, right? They're not from the undercast. Their lives are too cushy to be filled with the rage and the nihilism to be ready to lay down their lives and become a martyr. It's just they're were too cushy. And
we're
so
too for change.
Yeah. If you are about it, they should have tore shit up. That would have made a big fucking impression, right? Now, not to say that this didn't make a big impression, because I damn near wept. I mean, in the cradle of our democracy, our most sacred
Republic
buildings. I am, man. I'm an idealist around some of this shit, right?
This is something that I have mentioned to all of you at one point or another. That it's really interesting to talk to David, because I recognize where we all live and breathe and agree with the same. His principles aren't very different from ours. He just has a cause that we don't have.
Yeah.
That's really the main difference. Is that, and during my chat with you a couple of weeks back, David, I had mentioned straight up that shit, my life ain't hard. There's nothing hard about it, and so
friends with me, your life is hard enough.
Well, I do tell people when they ask me, well, what's the greatest challenge you have in your life? Well, dealing with fucking Brent usually, but but I manage somehow. But the point being is that I'm sure that actually, let me actually ask Troy, Dustin, do you see that there is real common ground between David the troll that you've all gotten to know with his the shit that he says to incite conversation, and what it is that we actually all talk about regularly? I'm sure you can see the parallels here. Yeah. I don't want to ask a leading question, but what do you guys think?
Troy, do you want to go first, or am I going first?
Go ahead.
Okay. No, I see parallels in certain factors. That's just the commonality of trying to understand one another.
Which is what I've been saying is the most important part of all of this. And it's really interesting, too, because I frankly, while I'd love to... what I'm trying to do to change things doesn't require that I point a weapon at anybody. You know what I mean? It's really more about the weapons of understanding how weapons are used against you is what I'm about. So, and that's because, as you said, David, I don't need to lay down my life for any of that. You know, there is an ideological difference. Well, not an ideological, but I don't know. There isn't anything that's repressed about the way I live, man. I mean, it's really not. My life is pretty fucking easy, you know. And I would imagine that we can all actually say that, you know. So that being the case, it's really tough because you bring up, and the reason I'm going down this road is you bring up something very interesting, David, and that is I have always said that I can't say that I'm going to sign on to violence in order for change to take place. You know, I've been saying that those roads are actually paved with conversations. So, but one of the things that I did bring up the other day was that what we're faced with right now is change is inevitable, but it's going to have to, and my position is let's talk about it first. And what I was saying the other day, though, is that unfortunately nobody wants to. Instead, we're going to have to fucking kill each other first, and then we get to the part where we're talking about it, which to me is just, that to me is lunacy. That is ridiculous. You know, why can't we skip over that part? You really got to burn down half the country, cause grieving families and shit to get what you want. Well, you're not going to get what you want anyway. What you're going to get is a compromise because there's more people here than just the two factions that seem to want to go to war with one another.
We're to the point now where you're grabbing someone's head and just slamming it into the pavement as much as you can. They're bleeding out. You're doing everything you can to catch a breath. And with your breath that you've got left, you look at them and say, "Can we please talk now?"
before I finish you off.
Way past the point of talking at that point.
We don't. And I think I put this in the chat. We don't. We speak different languages. I mean, I listen to freaking Levin and Hannity's mild. The other dude I listen to in the morning, and I'm like, this is the most batshit crazy shit I've ever heard in my life. Right? Because I'm like,
right, I'm going to have to agree with you on Hannity, and Levin is really tough to listen to, but he knows his shit. But Hannity,
shit. No, but it's not them; it's the callers. It's
callers.
Yeah. I listen to the callers. I go, you know what? We can't. There's no dialogue we could ever have.
You should have to take a test to vote. You should have to take a test to call in to talk radio. You should have
Well, okay, so a number of years ago, I saw a comedian who was talking about, look, man, we're all carrying around ID cards, right? That doesn't tell you what you need to know about this person. We need to carry IQ cards. So, you know, you want to come into this club? Let me see your IQ card. Oh, fuck no. You're going home, buddy. So, and
let me throw this. Let me be balanced. I don't listen to no progressive shit. That shit is ape shit nonsensical, right? I'm like, what the fuck are you people talking about? You have no clue about how the world works and what motivates people. I can't. It's just pointless, right? This doesn't make any sense to me, and I have no use kind of listening to people that I generally agree with. Can't learn nothing from that, and especially when they just don't make any sense to me. And
that's why we're here.
And especially when they tend to speak for you, but they don't know you.
Oh
so
my God!
they speak for you?
Say that.
Yeah,
so what David said to me a couple of weeks ago is, goes, defund the police? Are you fucking kidding? I want them to come when I call them. Like, oh my God!
So I had this conversation. So we had a listening session. So right now Oakland's going. So through all the stuff this summer. The city council passed a thing to slash Oakland's police budget by 50%, right?
Similar in Minnesota or in Minneapolis.
Yeah, right. I'm like, yeah, right. How the fuck is that going to work? But I noticed, yeah, dude. And so, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
In Oakland.
So, yeah,
we're gonna cut that in 50%. Well, what's everyone gonna do? Run around with sticks and rocks all day?
And so that's kind of. So
That's
something like so you're gonna make it's not gonna happen. It's not possible.
Yeah.
Because for structural reasons, there's the police have a union contract, right? You know, there's all these civil service rules that make this impossible.
Public sector unions should be abolished immediately.
Pretty much. But you know, but then they've got there's a whole other thing to go in on that. And so I'm in this thing today. Here's what I've noticed. The people that are screaming for defund not the people discriminating. More, here's my impression. I have no numbers behind this. It appears to me that people who have no personal relationship with violence are the ones hollering about defund the police. The white people in the hills, right? And so I'm in this call.
We've all said that.
Yeah.
I'm in this call.
That these are upper middle class fat white women that are co-opting this whole thing that have no fucking idea what they're talking about so that they can feel good about themselves.
You will not
We've
find
all talked about that here.
You will
Dude,
not
that's how-
find a more privileged human being in the United States than a college-educated white woman.
Yep.
Dude, I am sick of them talking to me. I had a trust fund baby white lady tell me this woman that's now my damn council member, she's good for black people. I'm like, if you don't stop fucking white splaining to me, you fucking, I'm so mad.
Oh God.
So mad at her. And she comes up a lot. There's a whole bunch of funny shit y'all get. You guys.
I don't. All right. I don't know if you have these in Oakland or not, but I won't say exactly what I do because I like to keep some of my personal life private. But let's just say that I deliver things day to day for a certain company, and many of the people that I deliver to have the signs in the yard that says, there's no place for hate here. All people are welcome. This, that, all these little empty platitudes. When I guarantee you that if some random immigrant from some third world country that couldn't speak English walked onto their lawn, walked into their front door, and laid
Get off my lawn! They'd call the cops.
Exactly.
They're next door.
Not a single one of them would say, "Oh my God, I have no idea who you are, but you are welcome here." Oh my God, no, it's all empty platitudes that mean nothing.
Yeah, and so the people, it's the idea now. Some of that is valuable to me because they will politically be against the people who don't want any change. My story with this, so I'm on this call and I'm listening to this lady goes, "Oh, I'm from Montclair," so that's the hills area here. Mm-hmm. And I just think systemic oppression of black people and state violence and yada 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 and we're not here to talk about law and order. We're here to reimagine public safety and come up with new ways not to use police. I just happened to be next in the queue, and I was furious. I'm like, lady, I'll be damned if you try to censor what I'm about to say here with my personal. Cause I live a very comfortable life, right? I'm not going out and tearing no shit up. I'm not trying to lose my material possessions, and so I get criticized, for that stuff. But I'm telling her, look. When 2 nights, it was a couple nights ago, there was 27 rounds. I was on my floor. It seemed like it was outside of my front door. It was down at the corner. And I'm like, I want the police to come now.
Yeah,
like,
these people, next time the Bloods and the Crips get into a gang war, they want to send a social worker.
Yeah, and I'm like, there's
good
no
luck with that.
So when I'm out there, nobody got hit. Nobody got hit. But I'm like, lady, because you don't see like the dude beating his girlfriend's mentally, emotionally disturbed son, beating his ass with fists in the middle of the street. I'm gonna call you. When I call,
can you come out here and help?
Yeah. When I call, I need to come. And she's going, "Oh, me and my neighbors have decided we don't call the police for burglaries, and we don't call the police." I'm like, yeah, but when they break it, because you can afford to replace your material shit. When they come and break, when they rob, we're middle class people. We're not poor. But some of these other people around here ain't got shit. You go in and break in somebody's house and you steal something, you don't care. You can replace it. You take this stuff from some of these other people. This is a major fucking factor. And so what this equates to me, defunding, is privatizing the police force. Because if we radically reduce police budgets, wealthy neighborhoods will hire private security patrols. They'll be fine. It's no different from the education system.
Yeah, they'll be fine.
They'll be fine, and then we won't have. I won't have. And so I'm like, look, it was a while back. It was the same thing with the shots. I called 911, and the shit rolled over to like a fucking answering machine. Right? I called that shit like 3.
Yeah, it sounds to me
times.
like they need 50% more of a budget if they're actually taking calls like that to an
And so
answering
I'm
service.
like, look, I want more police. I want more police. You can cut their budget. You can take all these other ticketing, traffic, homeless, all these other things. If you need to see the budget go down, let the budget go down. I want more police officers on the street. And the other black people from the flat parts of Oakland that are my age, middle age, and they're younger, we're like, we want more police.
I've got $1 billion idea for you. I want 10%. You can have the rest. So you hear about all these programs where, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids or whatever get to go do a ride along with the cops.
Yeah.
Because, we're going to do a ride along, and maybe it'll scare them straight, or maybe they'll want to become a police or whatever. It's not even necessarily problem children that do it. Like, my buddy's going to go on a ride along with some sheriff's deputy in a town in a few weeks just to see what it's like for one night. Take these suburban-ass white women, throw them in the back of the car with a gangbanger.
Oh, yeah.
Throw them in the back of the car with a gangbanger for 12 hours. Let them drive around on drug deals or whatever else that they do. And I guarantee you by the end of it,
you'll get all the money you need.
That's a pretty damn good idea.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Actually, David, take that to one of them meetings and say, look, before you cut this funding, I want you, this is going to be the condition.
Yeah, but those aren't the people that are voting for it, right?
Yeah.
And so the progressive wing, here's the hilarious shit. The progressives on my city council are non-black. The moderates are black. The people from the flats are moderates. The people from
the hills are progressive.
Yeah, from the hills and from kind of the middle areas are the progressives. And so I got, oh my God, this is some weird, wild shit. And so they are pandering to these progressive white people who are, I'm going to say they're well-meaning, right? And those are the people who are going to decide on the funding. And all they want to do is get reelected. They don't give a shit. Don't give a shit.
Are they well-meaning, or are they doing it for their own conscience so that they can sleep well at night? They really don't give a shit about you or your plight or anybody in your little community.
Well, I think there's an ideological tie together here on all this, because you can go back to the book The Naked Communist from like 1958 that describes what the communist movement wants to change America into, and you can find in there where they wanted to get rid of law enforcement and replace them with social workers, where they want to dominate the psychology department as a precursor to that, where they want to tear down statues and public monuments, where they want to discredit founding principles of the United States. It's like all of this is in that from over 60 freaking years ago. So this is not a new idea. And I kind of get irritated when it's like, hey, hello, they've been saying they want to do this, and it's the progressives who are also pushing socialism who are pushing all this stuff. And it's like, I just wanted to point out, hey, all this fits in a neat little historic box that's been around forever.
Because none of these people have history degrees. They have degrees in underwater basket weaving and feminist dance studies.
Right.
So I would say, there's multiple frameworks and analyses we can use to view this. And so the socialist, capitalist one is just well, it's not useful for most black people. We're racist, anti-racist, right? And so this way predates 1959-ish, right? These fucking Confederate monuments are offensive monuments to terror that's supposed to remind us of our place. That's the purpose that these were constructed.
And I have to tell you, if you guys don't know the history of those monuments, he's absolutely right. Most of them were actually constructed during the civil rights debates.
Right. Yeah.
And so some of them were constructed then. A huge wave of them was constructed in like 1910, right? And damn lost cause.
And for the lost, that's right. By the wives of Confederate soldiers. Remember that? The wives were co-opted to do this, to put a nice shiny face on it. This is what the women wanted. And
Daughters of the Confederacy.
Yeah.
And so so this is where this is the grounding of it for me. Capitalism cannot reform itself to provide racial justice. Anytime you get a movement for racial justice, the United States labels it communist or socialist. It's racial justice is anti-American.
Well, hang on a second. What is the what does capitalism have to do with the way that power in government, because I see it as corporatist. You see what I mean? I'm a capitalist. You're a capitalist. I own a small business. You are an independent businessman. You also work for a firm, et cetera, et cetera. You're a capitalist. This is how capitalism is supposed to work. So in that framework that you're talking about, I have to disagree. And if that's the definition that we're using,
I'll take that. Yeah. No, what do we like? Late stage capitalism or whatever they have. Whatever the way this shit works. But I'm gonna come back another step. The international trade in black bodies was like the first, was embedded and integral to the development of a modern capitalist international trade system.
That was mercantile, though. I mean, that really wasn't even capitalism.
I don't know enough about the definitions. And if we come back to the United States, we look at Mississippi was the richest state in the Union in the Cotton days. More millionaires per capita than anywhere else, built on exploitation of black labor. And this, we developed these theories of this racial caste system. I know you've said you don't agree with it as a caste, but the whole purpose of the development of race was to get this ranking going. And I don't think, and so the socialists that are run around with anomaly, we want to be socialists. I'm like, are you fucking crazy? The white supremacists will
love that.
We will not have, at least I have opportunity to go make some money and own some private property. If you take that away from me, the white supremacy theories are not going to go away. We just will have nothing to be able to defend ourselves. And so at the end of the day, that's why I don't believe in it.
That is that whole argument that, socialism will actually make us all equally miserable. So, yes, it will equalize things. We'll all be equally as poor, except for the people who created it and run it. That's where that's where, actually, it's funny that you and I talked about, we talked about Gramscian hegemonic theory, and he was really actually more talking about that hegemony actually provides power with everything that they need and takes power from the people who provide it to them. You know what I mean? So yes, to your point. Yeah, you don't want, socialism isn't going to help you, your family, your cause. That's not going to work. But again, I want to circle back around to what is capitalism doing to prevent it?
To prevent
to prevent forward motion for racial equality in the country. For the way I see it is this, and this is the way I frame it to people, because you know as well as I do about linguistics. You start talking about racial equality and you say things like systemic racism, people stop listening. So I need them to listen. So what I'm talking about is that America made promises, and the promises that America made in our Constitution, all of us patriots love this stuff. And that means for all Americans, American citizens. And so far, America has failed to deliver on all of those promises for everyone. So we're not, and that is not a promise of equity. It isn't a promise that we're all going to end up in the same place, but it's a promise that we all got the same shot. And we all haven't had the same shot, and every single one of us should care about that. Yeah. So that being the case, now that I've had my little rant about that here, David, what is capitalism doing to prevent that from happening? I am missing it. I'm not actually being
because we do not get that shot at the access to capital.
We don't have capitalism in this country.
Well, we do. Like I just said, David's a capitalist. I am. I mean, I'm a pure capitalist. I do business with other businesses directly, and largely my business is not regulated. It really isn't. I mean, I have to pay taxes. That's about the extent of it. But what I do is, California's got you're going to love this shit. California has what they call the Bureau of Electronics and Appliance Repair. And if you're going to...
Let me find a gun to put in my mouth.
It's called BEAR, BEAR. And if you are going to say, I can fix your computer, you have to buy a license from California to do that, BEAR. And what's funny about it is there's no test. There is nothing attached to it so that you have to qualify for that license. It's really just California collecting revenue. So that being the case, I am a capitalist. All of my clients are small to medium-sized businessmen. or businesswomen or business people, however you want to frame it. And they come to me and say, can you provide this service? Yes, this is how much I will charge you, and this is what my contract looks like. Great. We shake hands. They're better for it. I'm better for it. That's capitalism, right? So what we have in this country, honestly, to circle all the way back to where we started, corporate power married with government power is actually pretty much the definition of fascism.
Yes.
We are a fascist country. In order to make sure that people don't say that I think we're a bunch of white supremacist fascists, I say that this is economic fascism. Economic fascism is corporatism. This is where, and why do we have it? Why did Mussolini come up with this? Well, he came up with it because he realized that Italy's own constitution, Italy's own laws, hamstrung the government from being able to do a lot of things. Who was allowed to do those things? Corporate power. Individual private companies were allowed to do things the government couldn't. So the government can make laws, which corporations can't do, but corporations can carry out those laws. And so that was actually kind of the foundation behind it. That's what we have here. You know, right now we
have fascism with a large degree of freedom of speech.
It's funny, the Italians didn't seem to care too much about any of that stuff, at least until they went out and strung
They didn't speak
Mussolini and
English.
his wife up in the street. But the point being is that, and to circle back around again, I don't want to lose the point, David. Again, I'm saying what is capitalism? You say you don't have access to capital. Do you or don't you?
So as a community, right? And so here's my formulation, rightly or wrongly. Here's how I think about it. And I haven't thought through this very much, so I'm gonna. So what
let's be riffing here then. Let's riff.
Yeah. What I do is I come on the page and I'm working out what I think about stuff, right?
Yeah, we know that.
I'm not really talking to anybody else. I'm trying.
We know that. We know.
You know this. So here's how I hear my community experiencing this. And so here's how capital appears to work to me. The more capital you get, the more advantage you have. And the more advantage you have, the more capital you get. And because we are tiered, and there's this racial caste of wealth, the people at the top are accelerating away more and more. You know, this economic mobility works. We can point to lots of people rising. But if you look at community wealth, shit has not changed in 100 years. You know, it's not.
I agree with a lot of that, but
hold on, we got Troy over here shaking his head.
Go ahead, please. I've talked way more.
I was just hearing the classic description of Pareto distribution of wealth or distribution of anything. Is you don't rise the whole community from the bottom.
That's right.
Individuals make their way up the curve to that narrower person. So I mean,
that's right. And so if we were, but if we were,
that's not a. I'm just saying it's not a function of capitalism itself. That's how that
Pareto distribution
how the distribution of resources. But I mean.
That includes, like, for example, the distribution of intelligent people.
Yeah.
You know,
so in a normal distribution, you wouldn't have, black wealth wouldn't be, 10% of white wealth. You know, that would not be correlative with wealth. Our community would have, a normal distribution as well. Right. And so you can look at that and see this normal. And so this is my whole premise. This is the whole premise of black people who are fighting for justice, is you look at this distribution and it's not normal. And so therefore you got one of two choices. Either there's something wrong with these people or there's something wrong with the system. And that's kind of it. And everything else, flows from that. And so the ways, and that gets experienced and to a great extent, this was locked in the 50s, in the post-war period when America was an economic power, right? And so many families went from, poor factory workers to suburban homeowners whose now that wealth has, through real estate appreciation, has went up. And my community got left behind. And so that translated into funding for schools. Right. And so now then those people send their kids to private schools, and now they defund the public school system. And so, but then they defund the public school system, but then they can get the PTA, and out in Moraga, they can raise, a couple $1 million to fund their public school. You can't, shit, man. The kids down here at McClymonds can't get a fucking computer. Now I'm exaggerating because they can, but you understand what I'm saying. And so you get now that difference, and all of a sudden, sometime in the 70s or 80s, the fucking college outcome, the differences in what school you went, the college interest became much more competitive. And now, you get these tech companies that only recruit at certain schools, not include historically black colleges and universities. And now that becomes self-perpetuating. And then we get this huge sorting. Bell, I think, wrote about this in, I forgot what that shit, he used Fish at Philadelphia. Anyway, you get this huge sorting of, there's been so much greater sorting economically in neighborhoods. And so he pulls up statistical data that talks about in the 70s, you was much, our neighborhoods were much more economically heterogeneous. And now they've sorted. Same thing politically. And so we've gone through this great sorting, and the ability of, so the way racism comes in is the ability to get like mortgage, home loans, to get bank loans, to have access to VC capital, to get to those friends and family networks. And if you're really an entrepreneur, your first step is to raise money from your friends and family. If you come from
interesting point.
You come from Lafayette, well, yeah, you got a whole bag to buy the shotgun at, and you come from around the corner from me. And so this
very interesting point. That's something that you did not mention, because I was listening to the description of, we talked about this a few weeks back. But that was something that didn't come up. That's a very interesting point. When I started my business, I went to my friends and my family, so and they had they were able to help. You're saying that because of the lack of education, the lack of access to capital, the way it all started, there was actually no transfer of wealth from generation to generation. So you have a whole community that can't go to their friends and family, and because of it, they also have low credit scores.
Yep.
They don't have the job history. They don't earn enough money. Their taxes might not line up right. So you're not talking about the inability to get a mortgage loan. You're talking about the inability for an entire community to come up by creating business and buying real estate. And
that's right.
That was a missing piece for me. You just filled it in.
There's a significant segment of black communities that said segregation was better for us because we had economically heterogeneous community, right? And so now, if you're a wealthy black person, you can go live in the hills. You can fucking move to Alamo or wherever you want to live, right? And then in the 50s, you couldn't do that. You had, if you were a black doctor or lawyer, you lived in the same community with the numbers runner, And so you had these role models. You could see, you had some kind of social capital where you saw successful people, you saw their mores and their behaviors, right? And so, and I don't want to, what I definitely don't want to do is make this cultural thing. The reason I've had people report is they got negative culture, but and so when I'll relay it to myself. When I showed up at this lily fucking white Big Six international accounting firm when I was fresh out of college, I didn't know how to behave with those people. Right, I'm loud. I wave my arms. I laugh too loud, and so I didn't have. They're scared of me, man. Right, so I didn't have the kind of. I didn't play golf. There's a lot of business done at the golf course, and there's plenty of black people that learn to play golf just for that reason. I didn't know how to act with him. So, I come from a culture.
If it makes you feel any better, the only golf I ever did is I hit a guy in the asshole with a golf ball. If his pants had been down, the ball would have went right up his back.
Oh my god!
We were at a range, and I thought he was going to beat me with a golf club.
You guys see me on the page. I come from a culture we talk shit about you, right? Because we test you. We want to see. Well, that doesn't go over well with the partner. You make a snarky ass remark, then it's funny, and because you don't understand the social norms, and then you strike forever. I'm gonna say one more thing about that. The biggest client in the office, I couldn't work on because my colleagues told me, we think they're racist, and you wouldn't be comfortable working at this gold mine out in the middle of Montana. And so that is another way that career paths get lessened. And this mortgage lending, you can look at statistically, and you can normalize for credit scores and income. And black people get fewer mortgages.
So this is all very interesting to me because, again, you're speaking to us very plainly, and it's funny. I was seeing Troy doing this, and now I'm seeing him going like this. You do make all of this stuff make sense. This is why I wanted to have these conversations with you in the first place. It's actually helped me understand. You're filling in blanks that people on TV aren't going to fill in for us. Yeah. You know, Al Sharpton isn't going to come on TV and talk about, hey, this is why, use different terms so that these white boneheads can understand it. You do that very well. This is something that, so again, I want to poll the group, man. Is this stuff making more sense to you? Hearing it explained from this particular position rather than.
I agree with almost everything he said over the last.
I don't believe that
I'm not sitting here saying, look, I don't, I'm not saying I agree with you on absolutely everything. I'm saying that I understand it.
Yeah,
that's the point.
Yeah.
Everything from that he's saying is, to me, sounds community based. By that I mean, I'm in Utah. How white can you get in Utah? Right? We don't have that kind of thing here in Utah.
Sit back, have a
my
drink.
wife's from Detroit.
Oh, wait, never mind.
Look, in Utah, we drink coffee and play domino.
Yeah,
I know. Like my wife,
Black Mormon just got elected, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. My brother lives in Salt Lake City. He's a Mormon.
Well, your brother lives down the street from me.
I wanted to point out something. Yeah, that's right. I want to point out something that Bob just said. He goes, I understand David a hell of a lot more now than I did an hour ago. And this was the entire...
And I can speak for Bob. Bob is a hardcore libertarian / almost anarchist if he's not there. So, yeah.
So the point being, again, this is what the tank was supposed to be about. This is why I wanted to get together and talk to everybody. I've said, actually, I invited David on board, and David turned me down. So, and I'm not used to people turning me down. That's my, my white privilege right there, So,
a woman.
Right, a woman, right.
No.
So let me ask you. I mean, I've got some.
If I could say though, because I want to get into the thing that you asked just a moment ago that I didn't get to respond to. I agree with almost everything you said, David. But I don't believe that those are problems with capitalism. I believe that they're problems with the state, because the government. There's little to no evidence to show that capitalism held you or your people down. There is an astronomical Everest-sized mountain of evidence to show how the government has done so.
Well, and actually, David set me hip to a book called The Color of Law, and I've mentioned it to all of you before. And there are it details very clearly how our government has fucked over groups of people and created this cascade effect that he's talking about. So again, I have very often say capitalism is not a government system. Socialism
very anti-government. If you get down to the nitty-gritty of capitalism, it's very anti-government. There's no place in capitalism for the government. Capitalism is free market. Government doesn't exist in a free market.
So and so this is David actually has pushed back on me a couple of times. Where is this free market you're talking about? I'm like, I don't say there is one. In fact, there really isn't one. There is between drug dealers. That's a free market.
The closest that this country has been to a free market was probably the late 1870s to mid 1880s. We haven't seen anything even resembling
during Reconstruction. Are you nuts?
And yes,
in the Western states.
Yes. The
shit. Oh, that I'm gonna have to, especially in the Western states. I'm gonna say, really?
Go read Tom Woods. He explains it very well.
Wait. You mean like in the state of Oregon that was founded specifically to exclude black people? That's free market.
I'm not gonna say. Yeah, I wasn't gonna say it.
No, I'm saying that there were less government regulations.
Yeah,
is what I mean by that. Now, is capitalism perfect? Absolutely not. I don't think even the most ardent capitalist would agree that it is.
Well, then this is a great segue. Go ahead and finish your point. I'm going to bring up something.
Isn't perfect, but it's the most moral of systems because it gives everyone a chance if they're willing to take it. If it's not gotten in the way of by government. If government co-ops it and takes it over, then it's one of the worst systems imaginable.
Then it becomes economic fascism.
That works in theory if you start society from the beginning and everybody starts from zero. And so my problem with capitalism is the tie, the marker, the prox, race and wealth are proxies for each other. And in a capitalist system, those with less wealth are at a disadvantage at the starting gate. That's my problem with capitalism.
I'll agree with half of that, because in true capitalism, the market doesn't give a damn about your color.
No, in fact, the market wants your money too.
It cares about your capital. It cares about how much capital you start with. And if your race is tied to how much chips you start the game with, then you're at a disadvantage.
If you have no money and someone's trying to sell you something, they can't sell you something because you have no money.
No, and I understand your point, and I understand David's point. So, again, let me cycle through something that one of the things that David or Dustin is very interested in philosophy, and one of the things that made me want to bring him on and have him be a contributor here on our little group was his observations about the bogus co-opting of genuine philosophical points to be used as a cudgel for activism. Critical race theory, for example, was one of his hobby horses. So one of the things that's been really interesting to do is say, here, have you heard of this guy? Have you heard of this philosopher? Do you understand this philosophy? And I start throwing him information. So about 2 weeks ago, I said, okay, are you ready for me to flip your whole world upside down? Are you ready for me to begin to make you start questioning everything that you think you believe? He goes, okay. I said, are you sure? So I sent him, I actually sent him a primer on what Marx's theory of alienation. Are you guys familiar with it? This will begin. This is where you start taking those blocks, those things. Remember how I've described to all of you that the way I see people's worldviews around particular things like capitalism, for example, as bricks. Over time, the bricks actually build a stronger and stronger wall because it's self-reinforcing. Until I come along and say, really, this is what Marx said about capitalism, and I'm not a Marxist. He was a historian. He wasn't even an economist. And he was a philosopher. So let's see what. So he was a German idealist. So we have to keep that in mind if you understand the philosophy of idealism. It essentially says that all things being equal, what I'm saying here applies to everything, and actually it kind of doesn't in practicality. Being a materialist or a utilitarian versus being an idealist. I'm sure you guys get the point. Anyway, the theory of alienation is essentially this. It is a description of the, late 19th century capitalist model, which was, Brent, you are going to go to work in this factory and you're going to put labels on cans all day. And in so doing, you are now alienated from nature. There's no connect, because you have to work whatever hours the capitalist has you putting these labels on cans says, whatever days he says, you are now, most of your time has been taken up by putting labels on cans. You are also alienated from yourself because there isn't any element of what Brent is about as a person in the work that Brent is conducting in putting labels on cans. You're not able to say, look what I made. I mean, you can, but you'd probably be an imbecile if you did. Hey, I put labels on cans, man. Isn't this artistic and fantastic? Yeah. So then there's alienation from family, alienation from friends, and alienation from personal connections, essentially. And what that essentially says is that because you're spending all of this time and you're doing this, and it essentially narrows you down to being nothing but capital in this factory, you are actually a part of a machine. Then it alienates you from human connections as well, because psychologically, essentially, this is also right around the time that we had kind of a birth of psychology, and so some of this actually kind of lines up with Freudian ideas. But anyway, and then lastly, alienation from your own spiritual self. So that's what Marx was arguing, that this kind of building widgets all day, it dehumanizes you. You are actually removed from the four elements that make you human. It strips you of your humanity. It doesn't eliminate
me from getting a paycheck and being able to feed myself and my family.
Well, we're going to get there because, like I said, you have to recognize what Marx's model was that he had to look at the time. So
I'm more of a Stirnerite than I am Marx. God, I hate Marx.
I actually really love Marx.
And
not because
love
not
Mac.
because I agree with his prescriptions. I don't. But because he was the very first person to describe capitalism as he saw it. Now, he also did not decry capitalism ever. He did not say it was terrible, and he never said it was that it didn't do good things for people. He didn't say that. In fact, he said that in the past 100 years, never has there been a system that has been so incredibly effective at creating wealth. So he did say
Yeah, he's
this.
single-handedly responsible for a bunch of goddamn college graduates who've never even read his work to turn around and say that he's the greatest thinker to ever live.
That-
I often say you can always tell that whether somebody has actually read Marx by their description of Marx. Most people haven't. They don't
If
understand
they wear
Marx.
Brent, if they wear a Che Guevara shirt and want revolution, they didn't read Marx.
If they wear a
didn't
Che
read
Guevara shirt,
didn't
I
read Marx.
automatically assume that they're a racist homophobe.
Yeah,
So-
I would too.
Because what was Che Guevara? A racist
Racist homophobe.
Yeah,
There's
So-
a reason I have a Che Guevara shirt that says,
You are not going to hijack my conversation here, goddammit.
hey, so what about that weather?
So when we actually take Marx, there was a couple of, there's also, I mean, that's only one of the different elements, and we'll just focus on this one for now. So I gave Dustin a video to watch that kind of went over all of this stuff, and his response to me was, my God, he was a humanist, wasn't he? Holy shit. This kind of turns, because Marx really actually was just talking about how this is dehumanizing. I was going, that's right. That's what it was about. You don't have to, in agreeing with Marx, though, you don't have to say, oh, all of a sudden I'm anti-capitalist. Marx really wasn't anti-capitalist. He was anti-dehumanization. That's what he was. And actually, I don't know if you guys are aware of it. He died broke. He couldn't. Two of his children died. He couldn't afford for their health care. He lived. Did you know all that?
I need some of it, yeah.
He
I-
actually.
I- yeah.
His
So
parents were actually
you're
fairly
true.
well to do. Huh?
You talking about philosophy somehow way back when I was like, I gotta learn Marx, and so I bought like a primer and I listened to it and I read it and I got the long thing and I just sat here at work and just listened to like 18, and I was driving, listen to that Marx thing over and over and over again, and I fucking can't grasp it.
Let me ask you this then, David. Is what I just said help?
Yeah,
Was that actually?
that really helped to clarify the alienation. Now I knew about the biographical stuff,
Right.
dying in London broke, and his wife, and troubles, and being ran out of Germany into France, and ran out of France, and
Oh yeah,
and
they kicked him out of every major country in the world. Kicked him out, much like
Friend.
Americans. That's why we ended up there.
yeah. But I couldn't tell you anything about his philosophy.
Well, in his philosophy,
I don't hate Marx as a person. I hate what
he has come to represent.
Right.
And that is the distortion that I'm talking about here. So it has been distorted, so he was critical of capitalism. Let's talk about, let me get to the whole overarching point, was that his criticisms of capitalism were not wrong. They alienated people from themselves, from their family, their leisure time, because your leisure time is then determined by a capitalist. At least according to him, because your leisure time is a matter of when you are given some time to be with yourself, to be in nature, to be. You see, David's going, yeah, we already know all this shit, yeah. So
No, I'm thinking about it. This is interesting.
it is.
So he also talked about, and I'm sure David is a CPA. You're familiar with the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is another big thing. In essence, it is anti-market, if you will, because Marx felt that people should see a reflection of themselves in their work. So, for example, if you are, if you're a sculptor, that makes perfect sense. If you're an artist, that makes perfect sense. If you're a guy who sticks labels on fucking cans, it's kind of ridiculous. It's like I said, you'd have to be kind of an imbecile to see yourself and, hey, I'm really proud. Look at that 10 million cans of Libby's corn just went out the door and I put them stickers on it.
I'd like to make an official statement. The rest of us here at the Skeptic Tank have no problems with can labelers.
Yeah, you don't take this out of context, people who put cans on labels.
I can tell he's in the White House, but he will not disparage the good goddamn name of cans.
The good name of people who put labels on cans. Oh shit, man! Talk about another hijack here. So
the can labeling community that kind of died. and
The can labelers union
automated that. Yeah, they automated that.
After Christian calls me a hijacker, I'll forever be known as the Muhammad Atta of the tank.
Oh, I love it. Oh, shit. Oh, man, that's bad.
Jeez, I know.
Let Brent come up with something like that.
I mean, goddamn.
So ultimately, the labor theory of value essentially said that I should be able to sell you this if I made it for whatever I want, and you should pay that much for it. In essence, that market forces don't create that. It's the forces of the people who make it that determine the value of whatever it is they're making.
And I'm sure that that's almost literally never been the case.
It actually was. Let's say you were the only blacksmith in town in 1505. So you most definitely got to set your prices, at least until the Lord came down and said, you will not sell that shit for that much. But essentially, he was an idealist. All things being equal, all things being fairly distributed, the blacksmith, only one in the entire county, gets to set the price that he's going to ask.
Now, wait a minute. Wouldn't the guild have set the price?
Yes, this is why there were guilds. So yes, you're right. I'm just using a loose. There was no computer programmers guild in 1505, right? So I can use that as an example.
Yep.
You will pay what I say.
You see, I managed to split all my hairs off.
That's what you do. This is what you do.
No, it's who I am, not what I do.
Well, that's true. Okay. You see, that's Marxist right there. See, he's a Marxist man because that's what I do, not what I am. Hi, Sherry, how you doing? So in any case, the labor theory of value essentially said those things. So again, these were criticisms of capitalism that he was the first person to describe capitalism. Capitalism emerged out of mercantilism. Nobody had ever created a book that said this is how capitalism works until Marx did. So when he was looking at that, when he wrote this out, put it in front of him, he said, well, here's the ways that it's going to fail. First of all, he did predict somewhat correctly that capital and wealth would ultimately rise to a very, very small, it would be concentrated in a very small number of people. Okay, so he was right about that and he was wrong about that. And where he was wrong is that he did not predict that government would get involved and regulate. This was not something that he foresaw. That is one of the things that sustained the middle class. And how did it sustain the middle class? Because the people that were working for the capitalists were able to successfully lobby for things like an 8-hour workday, a 40-hour work week. Were able to create labor unions. He did not predict that labor unions would have the power to stand up to capitalists. So he also didn't predict that ultimately government power would ensure a more equitable distribution of resources to, essentially tinkering with the system was what we were just talking about. David was talking about, we were talking about earlier how government forces tinkered with the system to the point where now there is an unequal distribution. So, which is funny because I said earlier, all swords have two edges. So we can create a government force that is designed to create a more level playing field, and at the same time, it can also be used as a bludgeon. You know what I mean? Government power does not have any real end to it.
The government force comes in and allows for the creation of monopolies instead of stopping them, where under a truly free market system, there would be little, if no monopolies, because the situation wouldn't allow for it.
And then, wait, that sounds completely counterintuitive.
Under a truly free market system, there's no such thing as a patent. So therefore, monopoly would almost never be able to exist.
So if I can amass, if I'm Standard Oil and I strike the oil well first, if I can get a head start, I can amass enough capital to just dominate my field. That's what it seems like.
Well, that's because currently what Brent's point is that depending on how you maneuver it, the laws would protect you from not doing it. It would protect you from. They would actually be on your side to do just that. You see what I'm saying?
If there's no regulation, how do you stop? Eventually one person.
If there's no regulation, If there's no regulation, you would have to have the wealth to take every oil field that's available to mankind at once in order to make your monopoly. Now, one could say that you could amass enough capital where you buy off other oil fields from competitive or from competing firms and such.
Yeah.
But the there's really no chance that you would be able to buy them all.
Not maybe not literally them all, but it seems to me that then the two largest competitors enter a price fixing arrangement, whereby which they agree to put everybody else out of business, and
It's possible, but it's not probable. Whereas with government, it's probable.
Government would protect you. Government lawyers would go, okay, here's all the laws that prevent us from doing this. This is how we can actually circumvent them. Here's how, like I said, this is more of a economically fascist system than it is a free
and that's
market.
why we have so many such large multinational corporations now, like Amazon, like Walmart, people like that are putting
Well,
on.
David, you're a tax professional.
Yeah.
You know how that works.
They're putting
right?
them on pop shops out of business because there's so many regulations.
That's it.
Pop shops can't keep up. They can't pay their workers, minimum wage, because the nationwide minimum wage. That shouldn't be a thing. If you have to argue for a minimum wage, which I'm completely against,
then it should be local.
But it should be localized. If you have to have it, it should be local.
It should be local. And I have said that over and over.
Far less than the cost of living in West Virginia.
So wait. So help me out then.
Okay.
So here's how I think how this works. Walmart comes, sets up shop, and because their cost of goods is so much cheaper than the small volume mom and pop shop on Main Street, it puts them out of business because
Walmart could have possibly gotten to the point that they're at without the regulations helping them get to the point that they're at now, to where they can pop a super big box store down in the middle of rural America and put mom and pop business out.
You're gonna have to walk me through that closer because I don't know about that. Because just knowing overhead costs, if I can spread as soon as I can get ahead, if I'm just a better manager, just because I'm a better
did Walmart
leader.
start out as a 10,000 square foot superstore?
Something like you started small, yeah.
Exactly.
And so here, what I understand it is Sam Walton's genius was in driving hard prices and being able to source and distribute more effectively. Is that right?
That's how I understand it, but I don't really know much more than that.
I'm kind of guessing. I've forgotten. And so because he was a superior businessman, and so some people are just great business leaders. They inspire other people, right? And so they're going to
be rewarded for it.
Yeah. So they're going to get, and so once they can inspire people to be more efficient and more effective, and then if they have some genius in distribution or negotiating, just some natural advantage, once they get ahead and they can then spread their overhead costs, they can sell things for cheaper than somebody else incrementally, and then over time that gap just gets bigger. So I think, and I could be wrong, is that this then just becomes a self-sustaining thing where they just rocket, over generations, they just wipe out mom and pop. Because mom and pop.
There's the supply side of that too for your cost of doing business. Because if you have this multinational corporation and you need 500,000 items order of this item, and you're a small mom and pop shop, there's no way that you can, as a mom and pop shop, bring that in at the same cost that someone who's buying 500,000 units can.
Yeah.
So let's look at it from another way. You remember the New York Amazon debacle, right? That AOC rallied against to try to get Amazon from not coming into New York. The whole reason that Amazon was willing to go into New York was because New York was cutting them a deal for a shit ton of tax money that they wanted to have to pay.
Massive.
Yeah, $25 billion.
Yeah.
In incentives.
That's one of many regulations that's afforded to a company like Amazon that's not afforded to.
And that is where I was about to go with it.
Software store on Main Street.
Yeah.
And the way they sell it to the voters is we're pulling this company and we're going to put you to work. But also your neighborhood is now going to get a new Starbucks and a new sandwich shop and a new, we're going to send buses out there. We're going to do all this stuff. That's how that works.
That's why I got torpedoed. Because people now realize that's gentrification, right? And so this is playing out right here in my neighborhood. We're having these huge fights. So that's why AOC. This is why AOC and her faction were able to torpedo this, because the people who live there were not going to be able to live there because the techies and their money were going to outprice them, right? And so it's
It was
funny.
my understanding that there wasn't that this was not in a residential area.
Yeah, it's I forgot. It's closer. It would have had an impact. Close. It was close enough.
And if I actually owned one of those houses, I'd be really happy about it.
But if you're renting one,
well, so could it not be negotiated to say, look, what's going to end up happening is we're going to have a whole bunch of people that are displaced.
Yeah.
You know, so in order for us to make this deal, you know, we're going to have to give them incentives, tax breaks, blah 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 blah, rent fixing, whatever it's going to take. And I am not against that. Where I'm against those kind of maneuvers is at the federal level. If a city wants to negotiate with landlords to say, look, we're going to guarantee you people that are going to live here for the next 10 years, and what you're going to guarantee them is that you're not going to force them out with higher prices. You know, so and as long as, again, that's voluntary rather than forced. If you want to force it and I own one of these units, you got to pay me market for my unit. You know what I mean? I think there's ways to do this that preserves that integrity. Yeah. But I don't like the federal government doing it. To circle back to Brent's point about minimum wages, Bernie wants that $15 an hour. We need a living wage. A living wage where? Is $15 an hour a fucking living wage? Sure as shit isn't here. No. So you and I actually debated this before, David. I was talking about the poverty level, the yearly income that at the poverty level in San Francisco, at least when I looked at it a couple years ago, was $97,000 a year. That is considered impoverished in San Francisco.
Yeah. One of the Warriors players came up on a 10-day contract. He qualified for affordable housing. Because affordable housing in San Francisco, if you're a single person making less than $118,000, you need
you can't live. Yeah, you can't live there. And so, what do we do about that? Because I am, again, I'm a capitalist. If I invest in a piece of property, it's not because I'm buying it so that you can live there at 1978 rents. That doesn't make any sense as an investor. So then what happens? This is something Brent also, I think, was talking about when it comes to government tinkering with this shit, is that what then happens is that as it becomes impossible for anybody to buy that property, they'll allow a Chinese conglomerate to come in here and buy them all up. So now all of a sudden the people can't afford it, but the extremely wealthy can. Walmart is actually a really good example. This is something I wanted to bring up earlier, is that they will actually, Walmart makes so much money, they will take a regulatory hit, and at the same time, they'll help write that regulation, and that regulation forces some of their competition out. Yeah, so that now all of a sudden they're actually making more money, even though their regulatory burden is higher. Because like Target couldn't compete with them. They beat the crap out of Target. You know, and when you can beat the crap out of Target, man, you got some pull. So that is what Brent, I think you were talking about in terms of government getting involved. That's not free market. That is not
sit there and write a regulation that's going to lose them $100 million out of the gate. But over 5 years, over 10 years, they make $1 billion. That's a bet.
That's a win.
Feel I'd make in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what we're talking about, and this is also what I was talking about in terms of economic fascism. Like I said earlier, government is restrained by constitution. Government is restrained by law. Government is restrained in these. You can giggle, but they still are to a large degree, which is why they'll make deals with banks to bail out private companies. You know, this is why they'll make deals with banks, with Walmart. In order to, Walmart, we'll allow you to pull this little regulatory bullshit thing off if you agree to fund this community center and this group of buildings, for this particular senator's hometown so that he gets reelected. I mean, I'm simplifying, of course. You all understand what I'm saying. But this is where government being involved in these kinds of things and they sell it to us as a great equalizing idea. This is why I like the idea of the city of New York. If AOC was right, I disagreed with her because I think she didn't actually understand the economics of it, but I could be wrong. I actually move back and forth with her between actually really, really bright and a complete idiot. I'm not sure which it is sometimes. Sometimes I think she's actually way smarter. Sometimes I think she's an imbecile. So in any case,
she's shown over the last 2 months that she's nothing more than a career politician. She has no morals whatsoever in regards to what her people elected her for.
Well, I can tell you, looking at her voting record, she's no progressive.
No.
She actually stood up and voted for this ridiculous omnibus bill. You know who didn't? Rashida Tlaib. And while I don't agree with her politics, I actually respected her a great deal for that. I also respected Bernie Sanders for not voting for that crap because and you know who else I respect for not voting for that crap? Rand Paul. Rand Paul wouldn't vote for that crap. These are people that actually are what they're selling us. And unfortunately, you can count them on one hand.
AOC got on there and said, "Oh my God, I'm never going to be a bartender again. What do I need to do?"
Unfortunately, I think that she has gotten sucked into her own star power. And as a result, she's backed off some of the things that she campaigned on and backed off to the point where she's no longer fighting with the Speaker of the House. At least she wasn't for a while.
She knows that she'll never be poor again. She could leave Congress tomorrow. She'd have a book deal.
Yeah.
She would absolutely be on a TV show somewhere with her cooking shows and stuff like that.
And what is that? That's government. That's crony capitalism at the expense of the taxpayer.
Yep.
You see what I'm saying? So she's not walking the walk. Sanders is. I actually respect him. I disagree with a lot of his policies.
I gave Sanders some respect until he turned around and endorsed Hillary and endorsed.
I was going to say that's where for me I was like, well, okay,
opposite of everything he believes in.
Well,
at some point you gotta win. So I'm gonna keep the conversation, but I'm gonna throw in three placeholders.
Okay,
one is kind of random fucking factoid that I keep some. People get I don't understand this offshoring of headquarters, corporate headquarters.
Yeah, you
matters. Do. Well, it matters. Well, it matters far less.
You know it better than all of us, most likely.
No, it matters far less than you think, because companies are taxed where they sell their stuff.
Yes, I do understand that.
Yeah. So if you move out of the U.S. and all your sales are in the U.S., the U.S. still gets the same amount of tax money. It's not a loss to the economy. The jobs go somewhere, but if it's the headquarters, the jobs are not in the headquarters. That's one. A more fundamental idea that I mentioned when playing with is liberty versus justice, particularly between libertarians. Because liberty, as I understand it, philosophically, liberty and justice are opposed. I need the federal government to keep me from getting lynched historically, right? And so I need the federal government to put limits on your liberty so I can have justice.
I don't have the liberty to lynch you, dude. Sorry. That's not how liberty works.
In a free country, if the Second actually worked the way that it was written, you'd have a big ass gun to shoot anybody in the face.
Philosophy, okay? Philosophy.
Yeah, if we put this in this context of this made up thing of race, where all these pan-European ethnics are all of a sudden over a period of decades go from being an outside Italian or Irish person, and also now they're white, and are because they are allowed then have a higher status than other groups. Those people have shown that they will get together and get all their fucking guns against me. So let's hold off on that one. And then
why are they white?
That's for a different day.
Why are they white? They didn't identify that way. My understanding is they were white because government forms said white, so that's what they checked.
That's it.
I don't know. I don't think they had. So if we just think about what happened, and so you got a whole bunch of Irish coming over here at some point who were,
Are you white or Irish? Irish.
So they were Irish. So I think so. So I've read some of this stuff about development of whiteness in America, and originally white people were, the waspy dudes, Brits, and just the northern people, and
white Anglo-Saxon Protestant.
Yeah, the Irish and the Italians and those swarthy people were not in the club, and it took over time before you were, I'm not going to say it that way. before you were before Irish were allowed to be white because they were discriminated against too. But at some point along the way, they were let in the club.
Well, you already know the answer, and so do I. I read the same book. So let's see if these guys know. I mean, Brent's right. It's not about the forms specifically, but about government classifications for.
I don't believe it's social. I don't believe it's government. So listen, I want to put that pin up and we can move on. Here's where capitalism doesn't work, and this is real estate thing you were talking about.
Okay.
And so here's the idea of the day here in Oakland, and it's going to come up you're going to start hearing. You're hearing this at the state level soon. Housing is a human right, and we must decommodify real estate. And so this makes sense to me. So you talked about these companies moving in, and all of a sudden real estate values go up. Well, if you're just if you inherited some property 2 generations ago, why should you just be rich just for no reason? You didn't do anything. And if it forces your renter, you kick out your renters because prices go up generally. There's something about that. Because land is fixed and immovable, that creates some kind of inequity, right? And so if we're going to have, and it's why we see so much homelessness in the Bay Area, is that if land is a ticket, if land appreciation displaces people, it moves people from, people are not able to stay where they are, and there's a problem. Because there's too many people sleeping on the streets, and so I'm interested in this idea. And so I don't. My family has some property which we keep vacant because of some of the tenant laws. But there's something around this commodification of real estate idea that there's a kernel there that this is a problem, and that's a problem of capitalism. Is that if people can't afford to, if you have to commute from fucking Modesto to go be a waiter in San Francisco, that doesn't work. The servant class can't live in San Francisco where the masters are.
No, we've discussed this, yeah.
Okay. So we believe in real estate kind of socialism.
Well, let me rewind to something you said earlier, because two of the fundamental tenets of any philosophy, actually 3, are liberty, justice, and natural rights. So let's talk about something that you just said: housing as a human right. Human rights cannot be granted. That's the problem, because if human rights can be granted, the grantors can also take them away or modify them. So a right cannot be modified. So if I have the right for you not to beat my ass because you feel like it, and somebody comes along and goes, well, no, I granted that right. And you know what? I think you're kind of a dick too. Go ahead, David, beat his ass. That's what I'm talking about. I know I'm oversimplifying, but that's what I'm trying to illustrate. So a human right is something that comes, at least these are the arguments. I'm not saying, I'm not advocating one way or the other. These are very Platonic and Aristotelian, really. Aristotle wrote of natural rights in a book that he wrote called Ethics. And ethics was essentially the sentient, sovereign being has the right to survive. Survival includes what? Being able to shelter themselves, being able to feed themselves, being able to defend their own lives, being able to speak to power without the threat of power, ending their lives or actually affecting their other rights. I'm trying to do this from memory here. Essentially, the very foundation of our own Bill of Rights was basically Platonic and Aristotelian. It carried over centuries into British common law, and then from there into Enlightenment philosophy. And it was basically about, you have the right to exist without anyone fucking with you, but you don't have the right to someone's shit or public stuff. It's not your right. So a human right, for me to grant you a right, for me is power. I'm power. And I'm going to say, you have the right to this. Oh, shit. 20 years ago, we had the budget for that right. Now we have to actually change your right because we don't have the money or the political power to maintain the way we promised it to you. So now we're going to change it. That in and of itself negates it as a right. So if we're talking about housing as a human right, Government takes tax money, which is ours, and creates and buys up land, which generally they'll find creative ways to do it. And then said, here's homes for all of you, and we are going to guarantee them to you. Well, over time let's say we get involved in a massive trade war that devastates the economy. Now what happens to those? We've seen this in the projects. What happens to the maintenance? What happens to the upkeep? What happens to the rules for people living there? All of a sudden, the government begins changing even the rules. Well, you make $12,500 a year and you have no kids. That's too much money, so you don't qualify. That's what government does. So government can't grant you a right. Government can protect the rights that we agree are granted to you by virtue of your birth. That we can do. So we have the right for anybody not to kill you and take your shit. That the government can do that, and it doesn't really even require a great deal of money to do it. In fact, your own community can help with that. So this is where I have a problem with, housing as a human right and healthcare as a human right.
Yeah. If you have a right to healthcare, that means that you have a right to someone else's labor.
Someone else's labor.
Well, to a degree, because if somebody else's labor is being paid for in a cooperative, I think that argument, frankly, falls apart. Because you're not saying that I have the right to health care and you're just going to give it to me. No, those professionals are still paid. That's why I think that argument falls apart. Where I find the strongest argument against it is, again, we're going to say it's your right. And so here's the level that we promise that we can deliver it, at least until the economy changes and we can't anymore. So it's not a right. It's a service. It's a public good. I would stand, and honestly, some of you guys actually might get pissed at me for this, but I have not ever said I'm against public health care. I just haven't heard an idea I think works right yet. I personally think that we should be taking care of those who can't take care of themselves. However, I would much prefer, I want my own options though. You know what I mean? And I don't want to pay out of my taxes for somebody else's health care and then pay for mine because I want my own option. Now, there are arguments for and against those things, but let's stick to the human right aspect of these things. I see you nodding your head, David. I think some of that may have made sense to you.
It all makes sense to me. Yeah, it all makes sense.
The biggest danger I feel with healthcare as a human right is there is a cost to it. So however you want to collectivize it, there is a cost to it. And once you associate a cost to it, especially when it's run by the government, and backed by government power, then they'll say, oh, well, this project is costing us too much, and therefore we need to cut costs, and we're going to cut costs by telling you how to live, you have to live this way because you're costing us. You can't own a gun anymore because gun violence, boy, look at how many billions of dollars we spent last year through our project in gun violence. We can't afford that, so we need to eliminate the guns, or we need to eliminate big gulps. That's the really dangerous part of that whole idea.
You calm down, Bloomberg.
And I have to agree again. That's one avenue the government takes. Now, a couple of years ago, some of you guys may have seen it. I don't know if you did, David. There was a woman, Amanda. She was a member of the Young Turks. She put together this ridiculous video in which she was saying, socialism is just like Disneyland. Let me show you 15 ways that America is already socialist. And I watched it and went, you're an idiot. Do you understand what it is you're arguing for? You're picking these straw men and these ridiculous arguments. So I made a whole video where I debunked her point by point. One of the things that she kept bringing up is like the Norwegian and the Nordic model. And so I went and studied it. I actually went and looked at it. Now I visited those countries and I've spoken to their people about them, but I don't use anecdotes as evidence, right? So I dug into it and I found the Norwegian finance minister herself on a Canadian television show saying, yes, we have, quote, free healthcare here, but our own system is very expensive. It has slowed down the delivery of the product, so we are now looking at ways to privatize portions of it, because right now we have 250,000 people who are waiting for operations, and when they're waiting for operations, they can't work. So so this is one of those things, like, for example, well, Cuba has this great healthcare system. Of course they do. If you are too sick to be at your shovel, you can't provide the collective with money.
And Cuba has a great literacy rate because they only have them read government propaganda.
That was another point I made in the video, because she kept saying, well, yes, Cuba's not really a democracy and you don't really have the right to vote, but they have a great literacy program. I went, that's your argument? One person, one vote doesn't mean anything as long as you get a free, if you get free health care. Are you nuts? So that's what she said anyway. David, I see you.
I know it was kind of snarky, but Cuba's got a great literacy. They do have a great literacy.
They do. I'm not saying they don't.
Internet.
What I'm saying is that they need you to be able to read so that you understand the government propaganda that you're allowed to read.
Nobody believes that stuff in Cuba. They don't want McDonald's and shit.
No, they do. They do. And again, this was something that everybody freaked out when Obama wanted to normalize relations with Cuba. I thought it was brilliant.
Of course, yeah.
Put a fucking airport there, put some Starbucks in it and shit. That country will fall way faster than the Soviet Union did.
Just like that, because they know Castro needed an enemy, needed the U.S. enemy.
I thought it was a good idea because I really wanted to just buy some cohitas and.
So
you're preaching to the choir here.
Yeah, baby. I got a cigar problem, and so I went to.
You and I are brothers of the leaf, then, my friend.
You brother of the leaf? Oh my God! Oh, dude, we got to blow some.
Hey, you guys both blow plenty.
I do a pipe too. Got a pipe on the desk.
Yeah, I went to Cuba, couple of times. It was fucking brilliant, amazing, heartbreaking, tragic place.
Yeah.
I forgot what I was going to say. It's healthcare. So socialism. So the whole point of her video is in response to the political rhetoric. Because the political rhetoric in the United States.
You know the video I'm talking about, then, huh?
No, I don't. But this is why I say I'm a socialist. Because people call me a socialist all the time. I'm like, fuck yeah, why not?
No, you said that before. You're like, hey, people say I'm one, so fuck it. I'm a socialist.
Fuck it, I'll take it. Yeah.
Right.
Don't watch that video if you want your IQ to stay above 87.
Dude, you're being really generous. I was thinking, that shoe size is more reflective of the IQ that is generated.
But I get where she's coming from because of the frustration of.
You really don't, because she doesn't get where she's coming from.
No, truly, David. I think you're actually, without watching it, you're giving her credit that she doesn't deserve.
I'm going to project it. I'm going to project it onto me, and so and this is kind of an idea I talked about before. United States. The fight for greater racial justice has always been called communistic, and so that will make plenty of people say, if that's what communism is, I'll take it. When people say, "Oh, healthcare for everybody, that's socialism," yeah, I want that. I want socialism. I want to have healthcare. And Europe has these things that it's social housing. That's one of the things. Berlin has all this social housing. Yeah. Nobody owns. This is a video. Nobody owns anything. You have a place to live forever, and so we want that. So if that's socialism, we'll take it. So you get people that say they're pro-socialist without really being pro-socialist because really socialism. You call somebody so, it's just a slur.
This is part of the problem, and who I take to task more for that than the left, the right. If you'd stop saying shit like welfare is socialism, if you'd stop saying shit, stupid shit like Social Security isn't socialism. That's a government In fact, you remember
Socialist Security, baby.
Socialist Security. That's what people say that, and I'm like, no, that's not what it is. These are public goods, and again, let's look at the outcome here. How well is that working out? It's not. So because government will, one of my favorite sayings is that hand government a problem and they'll turn it into a catastrophe by solving it.
But it works a lot better than it did before we had it. So
at all.
I don't know that. So because I can tell you one of my favorite studies was, did FDR actually create effective programs? Yes and no. Did it actually solve the issues that were associated with the Great Depression? Not really.
Yeah, most economists agree now that if FDR hadn't meddled in the Great Depression, it would have been.
It would have been, well, not most. I can think of one. Okay, I can think of one study, to be completely fair, that came out of the University of San Diego, where they were saying he actually probably exacerbated the problem by at least 10 years. But that's only one so far. But you and I both read FDR's Folly, and I thought that the level of detail in terms of how he just kind of cherry picked a lot of this stuff. David, you are familiar with FDR's executive order to make personal ownership of gold illegal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the greatest. It powers the United States economy to the highest heights ever.
Pretty much. Do you know how? Are you familiar with how he set the price of gold for the government?
No.
By
No.
using his lucky numbers. I swear to God, that's what he did. It's in the book.
Yeah.
It was actually part of an interview that somebody in his cabinet did to explain to, because they asked him, how, this was actually a successful program. Well, he used his lucky numbers. So
taking the United States off the gold standard to unleash the international trade power. And so I do not understand people who argue for the gold standard. I figure they're economic.
I'm not arguing for the gold standard. I'm arguing for the abuse of power. I'm arguing against the abuse of power.
I'll sit here and argue for the gold standard right now.
All right.
FDR taking us off of the gold standard, and that traitor cocksucker Wilson establishing the Federal Reserve Act turned the U.S. from an economic powerhouse into a shithole built on a house of cards.
So
every war that we've gotten into since World War One, and including World War One, was made possible by the Federal Reserve Act, and then further exacerbated by taking us off of the gold standard. Because without those two things, we never would have been able to afford any of them.
Probably so. But people's living standards and there's a whole other philosophical question.
But it's all built on bubbles of credit and things that people can't afford.
Ever expanding bubbles of credit, and now we've got people have more material goods than ever.
Yeah, they have more material goods than ever. But
at least until they take us off the petrodollar and China takes it, then we're fucked.
The value of the dollar has dropped somewhere in the neighborhood of 98% since 1913. Okay. If you look at, let's say, the mid 1950s, a family of four could live very comfortably in a home with a car with the husband working.
Yeah.
Also,
wait. So hold on. So here we go. Because you had a huge portion of the United States labor force that was subservient to the dominant class. And so you have, and this is blacks, Mexicans, women. So there was so little the economic competition was so limited that you had huge numbers of American population that were propping up the living standards of, Leave It to Beaver's family. Everybody wasn't living like that.
Sure. But how many people are living like that now?
So if you think about, this is a good question.
That's actually a good question, and I don't know how to answer that one.
For that. And so the thing, have you guys read Temple of Money? It's the secrets. The subtitle is "The Secrets of the Federal Reserve." It's a fucking tome that thick, and it's really the definitive work. One of the definitive works on the Federal Reserve and the international banking
creature from Jekyll Island is probably the most.
Yeah, everybody knows that one, right? And so he talks about that. This is really a technical work about it, and this is, I can't say I've read many sides.
Can you say the name of that again?
I think it's called Secrets of the Temple. I think that's the subtitle. Secrets of the Temple is part of the title.
William Greeter?
Hmm?
Secrets of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country by William Greeter?
That's the one.
All right, I'm going to add that to my list.
That's the one. It's a fucking massive book. And so basically, we used to ship gold bars. Central banks used to ship gold bars around the world to each other, kind of settle trade deficits. And so that's a limit to the rate at which the economy could expand, right? And so when we had these depressions and these bubbles in the Midwest in the 1800s, because we didn't have a central bank, it's caused massive pain to your farmers in the Midwest. And so we ended up with this banking system because of the damage it was doing to people who are away from money-centered banks. And so this ability to inflate the currency has made access to create wealth out of thin air, has expanded that car thing to, you talked about that
we're not
level.
creating wealth. We're creating the illusion of wealth. We're not creating
Yeah, but as long as everybody believes in it, it works, right?
But
And
that's
so
the
houses
problem.
are much bigger,
That's the
productivity is much
problem.
higher.
When people stop believing in it, the house of cards is going to fall, and we're going to
Absolutely.
see a depression that this country has never seen.
Well,
That's
wait a
right.
minute, because David, I haven't asked you this before, but I've meant to. Are you familiar with modern monetary theory?
Vaguely.
So this for you guys who aren't from, are you familiar, Troy? You guys know about this thing? It's essentially saying that we can continue just creating money out of thin air because it is becoming attached to tangible things. So the idea is that there really doesn't need to be any sort of a baseline. This is actually something that Sanders argued for when he said, look, yes, we can afford $36 trillion over 10 years for Medicare for all because applying the mechanics of modern monetary theory is what we're already doing when we print shit tons of money and then have the Federal Reserve control inflation and hyperinflation through quantitative easing.
And that's all fine and good until the federal budget can't sustain paying the interest on the federal debt every year, and countries start to realize that the petrodollar means absolutely nothing.
That is the danger, at least until we reach a point where we actually tell those countries that have investments in this one to fuck themselves.
Yeah,
which
so what
is
are
what's
China
coming.
being the biggest one, and they march right in and take everything from us.
Good.
No.
That would destroy the world's economy. They know
would.
better than that.
Yeah,
There's I listened to that a lot. Well, we're going to end up in World War III
to
with
be
China.
fair-
No, we're not, because
fair-
that would be pissing in their own cereal. They're not going to do that.
To be fair, that is true. But us defaulting on the money that we owe China, that's going to mean that we're not going to be able to import anything from them anymore, and so many things.
Then how are they going to feed their people?
That's it.
See, this is what's happening. Is the
By that point,
the
they-
global economy is actually a really good idea in some ways. One of those ways is that it prevents wars. We're not going to go to war with China. If we did, it would destroy the world's economy, including China's. They're not going to do that. So instead, they are going to look for every possible advantage to leverage, and they can take advantage of the fact that we have temporary politicians and some who are very easily bought to work in their favor. But in terms of this, I mean, Trump came in and said, no, we're going to try a good old-fashioned tariff, which actually, Brent, we both read the FDR's Folly. You remember how that worked out? It didn't. It was a fucking disaster in the 1930s. The way Trump did it, they were going, oh shit, it actually created problems with the Chinese economy. That means we still do have some tools that can continuously do this seesaw thing.
Well,
with
it
balance of
created,
power.
As much as I wanted to
created
drag-
problems in the Chinese economy. It created problems in our economy too.
Well,
Yeah,
as much-
which you pointed out the other day by saying what we ended up having to do is bail out the farmers, which we've been doing for 75 years anyway. It just increased our bill. So if we actually went and said we're just going to create digital money out of nothing, Bitcoin style, and then other countries like Europe and the oil producing nations in the Middle East sign on to this thing, China's fucked. So everybody will have to come on board. That's the point. Is that if we shift these things around and keep playing with them, everybody is going to have to do business the same way. That's
it's
kind of
funny
the.
It's funny that you use the Bitcoin example because Bitcoin is essentially on the gold standard, not a physical gold, but there's a market cap on Bitcoin that can.
No, I get that, but the idea of the modern monetary theory is the same kind of thing. But instead of tying it to even one theoretical widget, it ties it to everything. Here's what housing values are. Here's what actually it's almost labor theory of value kind of thing in a twisted way. But you follow what I'm saying. I'm not expert in it. I watched 2 hours of this woman explaining it and went, that's both completely insane and terrifying and actually kind of ingenious at the same time.
It's to me, it's practical. I see that.
That's what I'm saying.
that
I
happen.
see the application of it and going, wow, that could actually work.
And it's happening now. I mean, we keep.
It is kind of happening now.
Dude, we keep pumping up the money supply, and the predictions of inflation have been
they've fallen flat.
And fucking
Well, and why? Because then the Federal Reserve, and this is part of the problem with it, though, is that the Fed then goes and guarantees these, these conditions for the biggest, most powerful corporations on Earth, while the people at the bottom are paying for it. They're co-opting our labor. Our future money is co-opting those Federal Reserve guarantees, isn't it? So that being the case, we're still getting fucked. it might not collapse the world's economy, but we're still actually the ones that are paying for it all. So when you're
But people are willing to loan us the money to pay for it because we keep sending dollars overseas. Now they end up with all these fucking dollars. They got nothing to do with them, but to come back and buy our Federal Reserve debt, and this thing just keeps cycling up bigger and bigger and bigger. But Brett, to your point, and I think this is maybe a limiting factor, maybe, is that shit, the whole budget's going to be fucking interest at some point. Yeah. And I don't know what that.
That's what Brent's talking about.
Yeah,
he's going all of a sudden we've got interest debt that's due and we can't pay it.
Right.
So what the MMT idea is that if then it can be tied to tangibles all over the world, all of a sudden the value of the money goes way up. That's the idea. So, and I listened to this woman talk about it, and at first I was going, "You're nuts, and you're going to fucking destroy the world." By the time she was done talking about it, I went, "That just might work." Because there really isn't any other option, man.
So what you're saying is I can get my reparations now. Just write me.
Yeah, but they won't be worth nearly as much by the time you go to spend them, dude. I got to tell you, man, it's 9:00 out here. I'm thinking about wrapping it up. But
I was going to say on that note, we should probably get out of here. It's been over 3 hours.
This is one hell of a great conversation, David. I'm really glad you came on board. Yeah, man.
I thoroughly enjoyed that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man.
I appreciate you guys. This is good stuff.
Yeah, I really appreciate all of you guys being a part of what it is that, this was a silly idea of mine, and, silly ideas sometimes need as much help as they can get. You know what I mean? So I really appreciate the fact that you guys all contribute the way you do. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And as usual, if we got anything wrong, mischaracterized something, misrepresented something, let us know. I would much rather be wrong and realize it and change what it is that I said, or correct what it is that I said, than sound like a complete idiot and continue to just stand on a pile of bullshit. I got to find a way better, eloquent way of saying that.
He wants to be right and sound like an idiot rather than wrong and sound like an idiot.
Hey, dude, that should be a shirt, man. That should be the Skeptic Tank shirt right there. Skeptic Tank. We might be right, but we still sound like idiots. I love it. So anyway, again, thanks so much for participating. I really appreciate all you guys and the different perspectives that you bring. It's super cool, and I mean, for me, it's like drugs. And knowledge, ideas.
You're why I drink.
Okay, I'm going to take us off there. Everybody hang out for just a second. Thanks a lot, everybody that came, all 4 of you or 2 or 10 or whatever. Thanks so much. Have a good night.